that. It's either that or, just punching myself in the head. And by the way, we are connected now.
Hey, all right.
It's already working. Let me check on YouTube because you always think you're connected and then you're not. So let me see. Let me refresh to see if we're in. And then I'll properly say hello to everybody. Blah, 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 blah. I think you're connected. Yes, we are connected. Shut up, YouTube.
There is a message for you.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. After all the trouble, as you can see, we've been able to connect. How are you everywhere you are? YouTube, I said shut up. Okay, so how are you there? We're in the time traveling show, as you know, because this is not about comics. This is about time travel, because depending on who I speak to we're in different time zones. So I'm speaking with my past, believe it or not. So let me check. For example, Mr. Matt Wilson, where are you? What time is it for you today?
It's 11:30 in the morning. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's good here.
Brad?
It's 10:30 in the morning, and I'm Winnipeg, just outside Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada.
And what about you, Frankie?
Yeah, it's 10:30 here.
Okay, so for once we only have two time zones.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's even four. How are you guys doing? How's things in your neck of the woods? How's situation? Oh, first of all, guys, I'm sorry. I'm going so fast. I didn't introduce anybody. So first of all, I'm going here, clockwise as I see you on my screen. Nobody feels offended, please. So to my left, Mr. Brad Anderson, how are you? How's things in your neck of the woods? Are things getting better, worse, same, crazy?
They're starting as far as the COVID stuff, they're starting to lighten up a little bit. Everything was closed, and on just this past Friday, they started opening up a little bit. So restaurants at like 25%, and you could only go with your household members.
Mm-hmm.
But it's slowly starting to open. But
what about you, Frankie? How's things in you're in Texas? How's things there?
It's so stupid. I mean, people still don't treat things seriously. Luckily, we don't go out that much, so we try to limit our exposure. But actually, we've both been lucky because my fiance works in healthcare, so she's gotten both doses of vaccine, and I've gotten both doses of vaccine.
wow.
So because basically we had a big drive here. If you volunteered to help people get inoculated and get vaccinated, you actually got your vaccine. But it's all changed now. But so I went down and donated like 6.5, 7 hours of time, and then so it's like at least you do something to feel like there's a benefit of helping others, and then there's payback to it as well.
Wow, awesome.
Okay, so you're the only one who's vaccinated here. So we gotta take you out. We're using our power to be envious of you and the same. Get out. No, I'm kidding. And what about you?
I'm still a hermit. So.
What about you, Matt?
Yeah, I almost never leave the house, even pre-pandemic. So it's
Well, you're a color.
Yeah, exactly. My wife works from home as well, so I mean, we were training for this years ahead of time. So yeah, we just limit our time at the grocery store. We get some takeout for food sometimes, but haven't been in a restaurant in a while. And so yeah, but things are okay here. Like I said, I mean, it's just we get up, we walk the dogs, we work in the house just like we were doing before. So we're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Is there? Imagine I'm your doctor. You don't count, Frankie, because you've been inoculated already. But for everybody else, I'm kidding aside. Imagine I'm your doctor. My name is Victor Frankenstein. Very nice to meet you all. And this is road ring, but it's going to become a syringe right now. So pop. I just inoculated both doses to you and to the rest of the world, just like that. So pandemic is over. Fuck it all. We're fine. We can do whatever we want. So what's the thing that you've been dying to do for months? Like crazy, like, oh my God, the moment this is over, melt my face, whatever, I'm going to do it. What is that thing that you've been dying to do for months that is the first thing you will do the moment you feel free? And you feel honestly like going out, I'm not going to die. Brad?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I don't know, like I'm a big sports fan, so I like going to watch our NHL team play the Jets and that. So I miss going to a game, or I miss going for a couple beers and watching a sporting event. That's pretty big. But otherwise, like Matt was saying, like I literally hardly ever leave the house. You know, we work from home and you work all the time. So, I mean, just for me to get out with some friends and do that was kind of a little unwind. But yeah, I don't know.
Frankie?
I think it's just to have a real night out or a real dinner out. You know, we do takeout, and we went on a small break for my fiance's 40th birthday, and we got engaged a few weeks ago. But again, you know, we're still out in the sticks, but we only went to places that had patios, and we can, you know, sit isolated from other people. And, you know, it's just, I think the physical contact of even touching somebody else besides just my fiance, giving people that I care about hugs, or, you know, eating food that I really like and in the setting that's set for that. I mean, that's the biggest withdrawal for me, I think.
Matt?
Yeah, I feel I can echo what Brad said. We go to our professional soccer team. We're season ticket holders to a professional soccer team here in Atlanta, the Atlanta United. I miss going to those games. And then I feel kind of bad because in 2019, I went to so many conventions. I thought I don't want to go to any comic conventions in 2020. And my wish came true, but unfortunately,
not for the right reasons.
Right. So I've had my appropriate break, and I actually kind of want to go to a comic convention.
That was going to be my next question. In fact, Matt, it's like, do you really miss conventions? Do you think you all miss conventions if you miss them? Because, you know, of the reality of it, is it just I just miss them, or we miss conventions because, you know, the withdrawal, that thing that you don't know you want until they take it away from you?
That, and, you know, like I said, I was pretty burned out on them at the end of 2019 because I did a good number. And then, but I admit, I think probably top of my list, being a little selfish, is I miss seeing a lot of my friends in the industry that, you know, we all live in different cities or even different countries for that matter. And so, I mean, I see them online. I don't actually very much because I don't really do social media, but, you know, it can kind of have some interaction online. But recently, I've just started to really realize, like, man, I haven't hung out with some of my friends in the comic industry in forever now. So, yeah, I miss that part for sure. And, you know, the convention side of it, seeing and interacting with fans is also fun. But yeah, for me, it's the seeing the friends, just like everybody. I mean, take it out of it being peers in an industry, just, you know, we've seen our friends less, I would assume everybody has. So I'm missing that for sure.
Yeah, when I started this, you know, the second show was Howard Chaikin, and that was the conversation. We were talking about the conventions, and Howard was telling me, you know, if you ask me if I miss the conventions, I don't know. But if you ask me what I miss, it's like I miss seeing my friends, seeing my peers, sitting down. And he told me an amazing example. Was like, imagine you're at dinner with the peers you expect to be at dinner with, and somebody just shows up in the restaurant that you haven't seen in years.
Right.
That serendipity is what he loves about the cons. You just sit down with that person, with that other creator, and you start talking like it was yesterday, the last day you saw them, when it was like 3 years ago. And that we can have a lot of contact, you know, like this online. But that, you know, that serendipity, that fun of seeing somebody you don't expect at a show, that is the thing we lose the most, right? That we miss the most, right? Right, Brad?
Well, that's exactly it. Like, the only time I get to see, you know, people that I work with in person is at a convention, or like you said, at a restaurant, or you go for dinner with people or something. And yeah, that's huge. I miss that. But yeah, and even just chatting with fans and stuff, it's good. It's nice to face talk to people besides online stuff or whatever. But yeah, it's like Matt was saying, like where you see your friends in the industry, it's huge, and it's so casual, and it's just, you know, you're shooting the shit about, you know, work stuff and everything else, but
it reinvigorates me, like, you know.
Yeah, it's also Frankie, I guess. That's also a big part, which is in many cases you're just talking shit about anything, and whatever part of the conversation, that is the most unexpected part, which is the part I like the most. Gives you ideas for work, right?
Yeah.
Something that comes out of nowhere. It's not even many people talking about something specifically, and I say I don't even normally when it's something specific, I don't get anything new out of it because you just talk about the stuff you know.
Yeah.
The unexpected is what gives you ideas. So, as Matt said, it reinvigorates you to try new things, right, Frankie?
Yeah. I mean, like I really don't do the con scene at all. I do it very, very seldomly, and usually if it's just friends that I know are going to be there that I haven't seen, or people that I work with that I haven't met. 'Cause I work with a lot of Spanish artists, so chances for me to see them is very slim. So New York is usually where I'm going to see them versus San Diego from people coming to Europe. And the last con I did was, I guess, a couple of years ago because Justin Ponzer was sick, and me and Justin were really good friends, and he was just coming out of his remission, and then everything went south. So it was like kind of my last chance to see him before everything went to shit. So, but we used to be like roommates, and we worked together for years. And again, since I moved across country and came back to Texas because my dad's health was all jacked up, and just the overall stress of the cons, like for me being under contract, it's not for me trying to get business or score new work. It's just basically I want to see friends. I don't want a booth. I don't want any of that stuff. I just want to see friends, give them a hug, have a beer, and that's the extent of my enjoyment of the cons.
Oh yeah.
Oh, guys,
There are new ideas though, because again, like when we were working in Florida at CrossGen ages ago, when you're those environments where you have so many creative people under one roof, it again, it's like almost like a bacteria pool where it's so much cross pollination and infection. To everybody's trying this, it's like, holy shit, I never done that, never thought of that style or how to achieve that effect. So again, with us being isolated like this, it's like you kind of go back to either looking at stuff and dissecting it, will these brushes work on this or whatever. So it's kind of a little more experimentational with yourself rather than being inspired by somebody else.
Look, Kelly Fitzpatrick. Hello, Kelly. She's saying that about Justin, I guess. He's still on my colorist list on Twitter, and I feel weird leaving him on there. But it feels even weirder taking him off it.
Oh, yeah, I still have his number on my phone, and I was close with his wife. So, it definitely, that was one of the hardest hits I took. And for a lot of us, we had a lot of people die from CrossGen all at one time, it seemed like. Our other colorist, James Rochelle, who went to work at Sony, he died a few years back, kind of out of the blue. It's been kind of these weird tragedies that kind of follow that studio.
By the way, Laura was telling me, Laura Martin, when I had her here a month ago, she was telling me about how crazy it was for you all to work together at Crosstown. Was it that crazy?
Yeah, I mean, she was my quad mate, so we worked next door to each other. So it was like.
No, I know that's why I'm asking you, because when I had her here, I mentioned that you guys would be, you, Matt, and Brad would be here in a month, and she said like, "Oh, you gotta ask him about. We were together at Crosstown. You gotta ask him, Frankie, about that because it was crazy." And I was like, "Okay, I gotta remember."
Yeah, it was pretty bad, and I know Mark Alessi passed away, I think, last year. The guy who founded the company, but me and him were at loggerheads a lot, and there's a lot of stories that went on where Mark would. He's a good guy, good intention, but he kind of like try to throw his weight around. And I remember one day he was like, we'd always butt heads. He'd always come through, and I just never took shit from anybody. And he's like, I treat you with kid gloves. I go, why? Has he got small hands? And so, I just shoot back stuff at him all the time. And one day I just walked out of the company. He pissed me off so bad, I got up from my desk and just left. And then, it was just so much drama and stress. So a lot of people chose to just work overnight. So they go in after 6 and work the 6 to 6 shift where they could play video games, fart around, do whatever. But for me, I'd get in at 5 in the morning and try to wrap up about noon so I could go have lunch with friends and then go home and fart around. But yeah, it's that place. Literally, we were trying to score a docu series with, I think, either A&E or somebody to come in and do kind of like an office type situation, following everybody around, and it's like, this is just going to end badly. It's like there's going to be, you know.
Yeah, I remember. I don't remember if it was Mark Wade or who was it, but somebody told me years ago that when The Office was big in the US, you know, that we should do one of these about Crosstown. And another creator who was at Crosstown there literally said, "No, nobody could believe it." Right? Well, why? Because it was too crazy.
Yeah.
You know, nobody could believe that was true. And I was like, "What the fuck?" And they started telling me stories, and I was like, "Wait a minute, no, you're making this up." Like, no, I'm not making this up. This really happened. Like, okay, don't do the TV show. You know, somebody could get in jail.
Oh yeah, then especially now with the way not political climate, but at least like the social political climate is. It's like they would look back and go, "What the fuck?" It's like some of the phrases and, you know, the sexism, and it's just like all over the place. It would just be like, "What the fuck? How did, you know?" It just, it would be bad TV.
Yeah, you guys would be.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: we are all in this business, so we have a big percentage of masochism in our bodies. We know that to do comics, but aside of the masochism, why, with all the possibilities you had in the art, you know, in whatever art form to do, why did you pick comics? Why did you decide comics is what I want to do as my main part of my living? Matt, for example.
I stumbled into it. I went to art school, you know, wanting to draw comics, and then by the end of art school, I realized I probably wasn't cut out to draw comics. I was okay at a lot of different parts of, you know, the process drawing, and then I even took some like concept art classes and did some sculpture stuff, and I thought, I like all this, but I don't think I want to draw comics like I thought I did. And then it just so happened in the town that I went to school in, there was a colorist, Lee Lowridge. He had a studio, and I dropped my portfolio off there. I thought, maybe I'll just work. I mean, of anywhere in town, this is, I guess, where I'd want to work after school for a little bit anyway. And so I ended up getting a job at his studio as one of his assistants and flatters, and then eventually I started coloring some covers and a couple of the other things. And I just thought, this will work. I was dating a girl at the time, you know, had got a job in town after college. And I thought, I'll just hang around here for a while, and just stuck with it, working for Lee for a few years, and then started getting jobs on my own after that. And it all just snowballed into, I didn't mean to be a colorist, and I probably still would have been reading comics, but if I had got some other job not in comics. But yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How long ago was that, Matt?
I got a job with Lee in the beginning of 2003, I think. Yeah. And then I worked for him for a few years, you know, just getting, you know, just studio credit. Like it was Xylenol Studios was his studio at the time. And I think maybe 2007, 2008, I maybe got my first credit in a book, like just going and getting work on my own, you know, like just real small run stuff that probably hardly anybody ever saw. But then it just kind of snowballed into like the next biggest job and the next biggest job. It helped a lot of my friends who were in art school with me were trying to get in the industry as writers and artists and stuff. And so like we would go to conventions as, you know, a group of friends and share hotel rooms and all that kind of stuff that you do. And then, you know, like my friends would be tabling next to so-and-so, and I would meet that person. And then they had a book they needed color, but didn't have a budget to pay a colorist because the book wasn't making any money. And I was making money at my day job, which was coloring comics in a studio. And then, so I was like, I'll color your book for free, kind of as like my night job. And then that would get me a credit, which would get me a free pass into the convention, which, you know, that was kind of my only motivation at that point. And then eventually you know, I even thought I interviewed for some different jobs, different kind of artistic jobs in other industries around this time, thinking like, I don't know that I really want to do this anymore. I'm kind of tired of working for Lee's studio, like just because I just not fulfilled anymore. And then I started getting work outside the studio, and things started picking up, and I stopped looking for other work and just kind of concentrated on being a colorist. It clicked for me then. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I do want to be a colorist, and I started really trying to get better and make a career out of it. So that was probably like 2008 by that point, and then by 2009 I was coloring. I think by the end of 2009 I colored for my first thing for Marvel, and then it all just kind of took off from there.
Mm-hmm. When did you meet Laura?
I met Laura when I moved to Atlanta, and she was part of Gaijin Studios then. Mm-hmm. And they had a space. They rented out a space in this office park, and it had a big room, and they would hold life drawing classes there or not classes, but you just go and draw with everybody every Tuesday or something like that. And after I saw them, it's fun. We were talking about we only see our friends at conventions. That holds true. There was a lot of comics people in Atlanta where I live, mm-hmm. and I only ever see them in other cities when we're at conventions because we're all at home working usually when we're in Atlanta. Anyway, so I saw some of the Gaijin people in another city at a convention, and they're like, "Oh, we're starting life drawing classes on Tuesdays. You should come by." And so that's when I met her and Brian Stelfreeze and Cully Hamner, and I forget who else was in the studio at that time. But anyway, I got to know them, and I was like, "Oh, Laura, I loved your work on Thor," and it was like one of those things. I timidly walked in her office, like, "Oh, I'm a big fan." And then, however many years later, I got to color Thor and blah blah blah. Anyway, so it was a fun little journey. That was a fun step on the journey.
I don't know if you saw the show with her here, but he got big praise for all of you. But he talked about you, Matt. She particularly said she loves your instinct. That there's something about your instincts about that she says she doesn't have it. It's like
she's too kind. I have like one little positive attribute, and then she has like all the other positive attributes. She's amazing.
What about you, Brad? What did you start? No, I'm not asking when did you meet Lara. No, I mean, how did you get into this crazy business, and why?
Why? Well, I've always loved comic book art. Like, I always like the artwork. Like, to me, a comic book artist is the most well-rounded artist. Like, you have to know how to draw, horses to landscapes to cityscapes, anatomy, like you name it. Even, fantasy stuff that doesn't even exist. But I grew up kind of looking at old Conan books, Buscema stuff. I just loved it. Hulk stuff. And then I come from a small town in Ontario, and one day I just quit my job at the mill and moved to New Jersey, and I went to the Kubert School there for a few years, and it was amazing. Like, how Frankie was talking about the studio environment? Well, that was 24/7. You lived with your classmates. All you did was draw. You learned inking, life drawing, like lettering, everything. And this was I think it was probably 1994-ish. And then to about 97, around there. It was incredible. So, and then when I moved back to Canada, there was a place called Digital Chameleon that worked out of Winnipeg, and they used to do, I think most of the comics came out of Winnipeg for color work. So they did X-Men, I think Kazar at the time they were working on. So I started working there right away. And we used to do color guides with markers. You'd have a table like full of markers. They'd photocopy
I did that
on paper, and you just start coloring with markers, and you write down the color codes. And then they had a shift that ran 24 hours, and it was a huge floor of color separators. So they would take the actual color guide, put it next to them, and they would digitally separate it. And that's when Photoshop just first started. It was, you'd make a gradation, and you'd have to wait for the computer to process. Yeah, it took a long time. So they had a floor that ran 24 hours. And and then I worked there for a few years. I became like an art director, and then after that, I was doing some illustration for a sports memorabilia place, doing caricatures and that kind of thing. And then I started doing color work just on my own at home, and I've been doing it ever since. And that's probably 22 years now, something like that. but I love, like I said, like I'm a huge comic book art fan. Like I just love it. So to get to work with like Gary Frank and, you know, Jay Fabek and these guys and Andy Kubert, like I still get, I find myself looking at the black and white artwork of Gary's stuff. So Gary sends me pages and I have to clean them up because the scans are pretty messy. And I just, you know, I geek out going over all his line work and everything else. Yeah, but yeah, I still love it. So, and now being a colorist, I pretty much know I'm in a good spot where I know what it takes time wise, so I can really adjust my schedule. I know, okay, well, this is going to take me this long. I can do a book in this many days. So it helps out for life stuff, you know, family obligations and that kind of thing. But
Frankie?
yeah, still a fan.
Yeah, I'm the old guy of the bunch. I mean, I used to do guides back in Malibu when they were still publishing. So I was doing like I think Prime and Hardcase and some other stuff, and so that's how I started originally, was doing guides. But yeah, before Photoshop came out, they were using Cod Barrett, which was that Steve Olaf used to use, with all those weird little gradients and quintupley. So they come out with those little rings of color that kind of space out. It's like all these mathematical equations that get your color sequences and gradients right. But yeah, I just I've always loved it. I kind of fell into it on accident. So I was working at a law firm out of when I was in high school. My girlfriend's father owned a law firm and wanted me to go to school and be a partner, and I hated. I did not want to do that. So I was doing design classes in college, and I ran into a friend of mine who owned a comic book shop in Houston. And this is back around the time like the ash cans were coming out and a lot of black and white stuff. So I started practicing on those, doing color guides and color separations and then digitally coloring. So I just scan and res them up, print it out, send it out, and you know, forever to try to get my first gig. And then everybody, I didn't even know if I was any good at it. It was like, you know, I'll see what it feels like. I had some art background from high school and everything, but people started wanting to buy my guide work. I'm like, okay. But yeah, I mean, I've always loved comics since I was a kid. I still have, I think, copies of my original Micronauts comics and some of my Battlestar Galactica adaptations through Marvel. So, I mean, and especially like when I was a kid was the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends 1970s stuff that I grew up with. Yeah, I mean, I've always been a fan of the art. It's always held kind of a special place for me, and you know, I got really lucky to, you know, get a place. And again, I worked multiple studios. I did, you know, work at DC way early on, and it fell apart because thought I was much better than I actually was. Just that part of flash and ego, and it's like, oh God, I hate that stuff. And then, you know, I went to work at Image for a while, and then moved out there, then finally hired at CrossGen, and then I got lucky when Marvel scooped us up after CrossGen went belly up. They came and got a bunch of us because, like, I was luckily one of the first one let go due to the financial issues at CrossGen, and Joe was down there because they were filming Punisher at the same time. So basically, all of us were like, you know, can we find work? And people that were still employed at CrossGen were like, yeah, we'd like to get some work too. It's like, dude, you still have a job. I just got let go. It's like, I need to make some money. But yeah, luckily, you know, I had met CB and Joe and George and a lot of the big power players at Marvel, and they were, you know, awesome to me. It's like I never expected them. I expected just to be, you know, kind of a grunt, and you know, no one really cared. But they were super nice, and so just I've been with them ever since. I still do a few indie projects here and there when they're available. You know, it's for small press, but yeah, as of now, I'm still exclusive with them, and it's been like 17 years. So yeah, it's just, you know, the hermit life. You work 6-7 days a week.
Oh,
when you get a chance to go out, you have to plan a vacation almost 6-7 months in advance, and then hope your schedule doesn't conflict with it.
Yeah. Usually my San Diego Comic Con's kind of like my little vacation. So I usually go to that just and bring the family, and we hit the beach and stuff, and it's an excuse to kind of step away from the office. I mean, because most everyone is anyway. But
yeah.
So I never really do convention.
Are there any other? I know with Matt, you guys have a lot of other art talent in Atlanta area. Like Laura's there, and I think isn't Brian Reber still there too, or did he move out?
Yeah. Brian's another colorist that lives here. Yeah.
So yeah, I got lucky too moving to San Antonio because we have other the Guru Effects guys are here. So Lee and Joey. So there's a few other illustrators. So I was like, man, I know there's some art, so it definitely helps. Brad, I didn't know if there's any up there at all in Manitoba.
Yeah, there's a few. Dan Brown, we used to work together. He does some stuff for Marvel now, I think. I haven't talked to him in a long time. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the big stuff is, Frank Wheatley too. He's just outside of Manitoba here, outside of Winnipeg. To work on.
That's like my saving. But yeah, at least having someone to kind of have local, you can shoot stuff off of, and if like, just talk shop outside of editorial and stuff. It's like, can you look at this? It's like, what the fuck were they thinking? Or what would you do with this? And,
well, a lot of times I'll talk with like Jay Fabic or guys I'm working on projects with. I'll talk to them directly, Brad Walker and whatever. But yeah, like around here there isn't really that kind of little group where I can connect with. Yeah, but I think I had Toronto, New York, and San Diego booked for conventions, and then everything got canceled because of COVID. So I was pretty pumped to get, because I hardly ever do the convention stuff. But yeah, it's like I was kind of bummed out about that. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah, well, have patience, wait and survive. That's the only thing I can say. But you answered the question before in a way, Brad. But I want to ask you. I want to ask you all about this too. Is why do you keep coming back to comics? We know why did you start, but why do you keep coming back and say, you know what, fuck it, I don't want it to do anymore.
I don't know.
Why?
Even when I'm done working all day, I'll still sit down with a drawing pad and sketch stuff out, and just for fun. And I always end up, I'm just a fan. Like, why do I don't know. I don't know. It's got a hold of me. I can't let it go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of other jobs you could be doing, but I mean, to get to do this and make a living at it, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, now I know how to schedule my time and everything, so I can work, a regular business hour a day and still get all my stuff done. So it helps. It helps mentally.
Absolutely, Matt.
I don't know what else I could do at this point. I'm not suited for anything else. I have no other skills. They've all atrophied. I don't know. I it's a very enjoyable job. Like I said, I started thinking, I want to draw comics when I was, 18 years old or whatever. And maybe I could have if I had really stuck with it and put in the work, because it's a ton of work. I can't remember who said it before, but it was like, I hold comic artists in really high regard because they have to be able to draw everything. I mean, and the storytelling aspect of it. And I couldn't cut it at that point. But once I got into the coloring and realized like, oh, wow, I get to, and I'm fortunate enough to have enough work to do this, that like I get to go from coloring one book drawn by an artist in one style, and then the next week I'm working on a different book in a completely different style. So I get to, try different things, flex different, coloring muscles. I find that part of the job really enjoyable because it stays pretty fresh. And just about the time I'm like, all right, I'm getting a little burnout on this particular, aspect of a project. Well, then I'm about finishing that up, and I'm working on a project that has some different things to focus on. So, it's still a job. So there's still obviously burnout. There's still times where you lack motivation, but or not motivate, but inspiration, I should say. You lack inspiration, but the deadline's still there. So the deadline's not going to wait for your inspiration to show up. So sometimes it feels like a job still, but usually it's almost entirely enjoyable. And yeah, I mean, what else would I be? It's better than my grandpa used to say when I would complain about having to do something as a kid. He would tell me, well, it's better than digging ditches. And so anytime I don't like, or, you know, I'm feeling frustrated with work, that my grandfather's voice pops into my head is obviously jokingly, I say to myself, it's better than digging ditches, because there's a lot between coloring comics and digging ditches that that I'd probably be better than. But like,
there's a lot of things in between. Yes.
Yeah. But so I often say that to myself if I get feeling like, oh, I'm not into this, I don't want to do this. You know, and sometimes, you know, you do just have to take a break. It's good to reset. You know, either go into convention, you know, because you're in these rooms, but we're in these rooms by ourselves essentially. And like I understand the things I'm doing are being put out into the world, but there's a disconnect there because I don't always know how people are receiving them, or I don't fully understand that, you know, how what I'm doing affects somebody else. So it's nice to go take a break sometimes from work, and that's what I use cons for a lot too, is seeing friends, like I said, and then just kind of refilling the tank is in terms of like, besides just artistic inspiration or motivation, like it's good to know, you know, what this stuff is for. So then you can come back and be pumped to do it some more. So
yeah, what you said just reminded me of, you know, I'm the fifth of 5 brothers. And I remember one conversation, just out of the blue, I was talking to my older brother, and he said, you don't know how lucky you are. And I was like, what are you talking about? It wasn't even about work. And he was like, you are the only one who's doing in life exactly what you've wanted to do forever. You know, and you don't know how lucky you are. I didn't want, you know, now he's one of the biggest bosses, Michelin, you know, the wheel company in my state. But he's like, I never wanted to do this. I started working, you know, on a car dealership, and I grew up on that. And now I'm a director, you know, in this state. But this is not what I wanted to do. You know, I do it. It's my job. But you picked from a young age. This is what I want to do. This is my path, and you got to it. So always remember. He told me, always remember how lucky you are. And since then, I never forgot that. Every time I get burned, I like, you know what? I'm lucky as fuck, so just shut up and go for it, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's time, like I was never really on social media before, like never on Facebook and all that kind of stuff until maybe just like a few years ago, maybe 2 or 3. But I found that how Matt was saying about kind of recharging and kind of getting new inspirations in that, while my Twitter is basically, I only follow other artists, and so it exposes me to different colorists and styles and just amazing artwork. And it really gets me pumped to kind of keep going. And then you see some of this cool stuff. And then, you know, I'll try different things, or, oh, I saw this, he did that. And I try to figure out, you know, technically how it was done and work on it. But yeah, but even recharging, I think it's huge for us because, like Matt was saying, you live in your bubble basically, right? And your calendar's full, and you got to keep cranking stuff out. And then when my work day is over, I like to get outside and maybe dig a ditch or something, you know, like cut grass, or because we're out in the country, so I get to be out and about. So it's just a matter of just having that balance too. So I think that's huge.
I think Frankie lost power, and he's trying to
poor
Oh,
Frank's sitting in the dark now.
We can see you, Frank.
Blows.
Don't worry. So that if you can answer now, that's the same question for you. Why do you keep coming back?
Me?
Yeah.
I mean, I know what it's something that I know how to do proficiently, and I mean, it's become so almost ingrained in the last 20 plus years of my life. There's other stuff. I mean, I you know, there was one year I thought I was just going to leave and try to do something else, and I just had that one burnout session to where I was like, this is just becoming kind of overwhelming. But I stuck it out, and it's there's a level of fulfillment in it, but it's also very stressful because I'm like my own worst critic. I mean, if I do something, everybody says, "Oh, that looks fucking great." I'm like, you don't know what I had to go through. I still fucking hate it, and it's as long as it goes through editorial and they're okay with it, then I'm fine. But and again, like all our lives, especially that we're working on deadlines, is we have a certain amount of time we can spend on each page. And Dave McCaig is one of them too. I talked with who's he sets a clock. Basically, every page has a 2-hour clock. So whatever happens on that page is happening in this 2 hours because that's what I'm spending on it. And there's
Dave
I'm not that rigid. Pardon?
I used to work with Dave McCaig at Digital Chameleon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he was.
Dave is like super guy.
Oh man, I love his palette and everything. Like he's so good. He used to actually run a training program there too. So and then he moved away, and so yeah, he's off. But it used to be like you only had 2 hours to work on a page back in the shop, like in the studio environment. Like it was, you had to, everything was timed. So, and it was, your regular work day is like a business hour. So I kind of still keep that model so I could break down, an entire book right down to the, per page, how long it's going to take, depending on the artist. Right. But, yeah, that's funny. That still does that.
But that's amazing to know, because he applies something that from before his time in comics in a way. He applies it to his current work in comics. So it's just, the experiences you bring. And this is something you can also, mention here. Frankie talk about the experiences you bring from outside of comics. They still affect you and the way you work, right?
Yeah. I mean, because you have to realize, again, everybody, fans who don't understand how the industry works internally would say, oh yeah, spend all the time. I want to see this. You spend 2 days on this page. It's like, dude, I can't afford to spend 2 days on this page. I'm trying to get like at least 3 pages done a day just to, keep lights on and keep things going. So it's like, ideally, yeah, if we lived in a society that had no monetary value, it'd be sure I could do whatever. And, but again, it is a business, and you try to have to make the most of what you can in a limited amount of space. Otherwise, you just can't make a living at it.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think that even if you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you guys could do just, you had an amazingly high page rate, like fucking crazy. Just say that. Of course, we are not going to say numbers here, people, so don't ask. But imagine that you have a huge page rate. Would you really want to do it? I mean, would you really want to do just one book a month or every 3 months, to say something? Or you guys would like cherish the possibility of, like, what Matt was saying. You have Russell, at the same time you can move to Cliff Chang. Or in your case, you move from Jay Fabok to Andy Kubert. Or in your case, Frankie, you have my two guys, Pera Perez, at the same time you have Cafu, which are like, water and oil, completely different. Would you guys cherish that chance of being able to change from flatter colors to more volumetric colors, etc.? Because I think every time I think that you could only color one guy a month, I think you guys would really get bored, because you wouldn't have the chance to just change the muscles you use, right, Matt?
Yeah, I wouldn't want it to go to one, maybe 2 or 3. Cut it in half for me, I guess. Yeah, and I don't know. I often wonder this because having colored for so many years now, and referencing what the other guys were saying about, I mean, there's a time limit per page. Even if you're not setting a clock, usually you kind of mentally, like, all right, time to move on. This page is done because I've got 19 others to finish. I don't know if I'm naturally this way or if I've just been trained now over all these years of coloring. I don't know how finished I could take a piece of art and say it was just a piece of art I was creating on my own. I think my colorist brain would be like, good enough, let's move on. So I think if I was given a full month to color one issue, I'd probably still do it in the last 4 days of the month. I don't know if I would spend all 30 days on a 20-page comic. I don't know if I could do it. Again, I think maybe that's some of the training my brain has just received over the years. But yeah, that doesn't sound as appealing to me, unless, for example, say maybe I was drawing it, but I'm nowhere near that level to be drawing a comic. But I don't know that I would just want to color one other person's comic art in a month and that's it. No, nothing else. I don't think that would be appealing to me.
Right.
That was what Crosstown was all about.
You have
because you had one artist, everybody had one book, and that was your whole thing. You did one book a month, and 20 pages or 22 pages, and 22 days plus a cover, and that was it. That's all they wanted you to do. I mean, again, our
yeah, but you get that,
I think we lost Frankie again. Okay, Brad.
You get that kind of commercial art mentality, like exactly what Matt was saying. Like you made a good point. Like I don't know how far I could take a page or a cover, let's say, because I never have. Like I don't know unless I was painting with acrylic paints or like actual watercolor or something like that. But
I think I would need a whole year of retraining, basically, like of saying like, all right, I'm going to really push this each page as far as I can push it. I think I would need a whole year of redoing my brain, retraining my brain to get into that mode.
Hello again, Frankie. Yeah, because it's not just what you just said, guys. You're trained to do an amount of issues per month, and suddenly it's like, no, you're rich, but you can only do one.
This is on my mind a lot.
And then I would ask you guys, I literally would ask you, okay, you've been for 6 months doing only 1 month of one book a month. Now I'm going to tell you, I am dropping your page rate so you can do 2 or 3. What would you pick?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure most of you, because you've been trained to do that, would pick, give me 3 books and lower my rate, because if not, I'm just going crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about this a lot because I think, well, when the day comes where I don't have to color comics for a living, hopefully, get to retire. I know that's a foreign concept for a lot of freelancers, but assuming it will happen, I often think like, what will I do with all my time? Like I have a lot of other interests, creatively outside of comics.
Well, Kelly is saying that Matt is too busy traveling the US, going on amazing hikes and taking breathtaking photos. They are completely makes my timeline happy. So.
Yeah, I mean, the photography being one of my other creative interests. But yeah, like I often think like, well, when I don't have to spend most of my day coloring comics, what would I devote all my time to? And will my colorist brain allow me to dive into a new hobby, as deeply as say, like the example you're giving? Like, would you just spend all month coloring one book like that? I apply that to some other creative interests that I have. Like I'd like to try and give that a shot, but I'm a little worried that I've trained my brain over all these years to just kind of, all right, this is good enough, let's move on. I don't know how deeply I'll be able to dive into any creative endeavor.
Well, and there's all the whole life aspect too. Like I have 2 kids, 17 and 15. So, you got to work, right? So, like I said, I like to. I mean, I know how long it'll take me to do a book and different projects, so I could fill out my schedule and still have a balance with life stuff too, which I think is huge.
Yeah. Now look at it from the perspective of your 2 teenage kids. Dad only has 1 book a month to do. He has a lot more time to be around us. What do you think they could say? Like yes, or they could be like, no, Dad, stay away.
Probably no, they're teenagers. Oh, yeah, Dad's not cool.
Frankie? Oh, Frankie, frozen.
Oh, you're frozen.
Yeah. You're frozen. But anyway, as we were going, now let me ask you about something deep. It's not deep, but it sounds good if I say it. What about how important it is to know color theory to be able to break it, or to literally ignore it?
Yeah, I think it's the most important to know it before you break it or discard
Yes.
it. Yeah. Because
Well,
at least you know how you're breaking it and how you're discarding it.
You can't break it without knowing it first.
Yeah,
Or
for
at least
sure.
you shouldn't try.
It's like if you're illustrating, like Calvin and Hobbes type artwork, right?
Mhm.
Well, I think you still need to be a good artist at proper anatomy and everything else, and then you can kind of pick your style you want to draw. But you can't just start drawing cartoon characters without knowing, how to really draw anatomy or real life stuff. So I think that applies to color theory too, right?
Yeah.
Like Matt was saying, like know it and then know when you're breaking it or how you're breaking it.
Yeah,
Matt?
for sure. Yeah.
It
Frank?
is, Frank.
Do you hear us?
Yeah.
I was
Hang on,
like,
I'm
my
just
question was-
freezing out here.
No, I don't know if
12
you
degrees.
I don't know if you heard the question. I was saying that how important it is to know color theory to be able to break it. Do you find color theory is something really important? It's really important to your work, and this is for all of you.
Yeah, I mean,
Or just something.
with the color theory, I mean, I think it's definitely a point important, especially for modern comics, because you have to create the drama, the separation, the environment, the atmospheric. I mean, everything is kind of gone, into pushing and pulling. Whether you're trying to go monochromatic for dramatic effect, or being completely pushing foreground, background, just with color and value. So, I mean, yeah, I think you should know it before you break it, because otherwise, because people, even early people start out like me, you would try to cheat it and, just emulate what you saw. And then when it comes time to practice it and be creative with it, it just doesn't work right. Like you'll see either like the lighting's off, or it's not pushed far enough, or it's too close. And
Well, and I think with comics, you're limited on, well, not limited, but you might have 3 different locations on one page, like a 9-panel grid. You might have 3 different areas, so you can't just do that. Like you have to force the location change for the reader, emphasize that. So you're kind of limited. Well, not limited, but you're kind of forced to make certain decisions. If I'm doing an outside scene at night, well, I'm not going to have it warm and yellow, because then the next page you're inside a living room with a fireplace. So so I really push that fact, warm and cool, and like Frank was saying, the push and pull stuff. So, but that's comics, right? You just gotta. Sometimes you're forced to do a color that you really don't want to do.
And the way, like, I mean, you guys may do the same thing, is that, I mean, every time I finish a page, I kind of have to step away from it for a while, because, like, you're so into it while you're working on it, and then, by the time you take a second look, it's like, okay, what did I miss? Then you have to go back and either push and pull a few other things. For me, it's either tweaking some rendering or looking at something that looked right, when you're getting it out.
Yeah, when it's done, I file it away. I never look back. There's no time.
Yeah, it just depends.
No,
Yeah, sometimes then it's things are due in a hurry. You're just closing the file and moving on. But there's times where I've sent the email with the JPEGs attached, like, okay, guys, here's the colors, and I see something, I'm like, dang it, like.
Yeah.
No, that's I see Roger the theory of Carlos Pacheco always says page delivered, page forgotten.
Yeah.
Well, you just got to move on to the next. Like you got a pile sitting in the queue, right? So you have to get rolling. So you can't really, like, it is commercial art too. Like, I'm not a fine artist where I can really take my time and pick and choose. And sometimes you just have to, realize it's comics and just continue. But I find when I'm starting a new sequence, what's that? Sorry,
Frank?
When I was living in Orange County for a while, in California. And Dan Kemp, who used to do all the Todd McFarlane stuff, lived maybe a mile or two from my house. So he came over and we were hanging out. And he's like, "Yeah, I do this book in like I think he'd do an issue of Spawn in like 2 or 3 days straight." So basically, he would just stay up and crank for almost 3 days and say, "I'm done." And that was his one book a month. So it's like just got to realize. Because I used to spend ridiculous amounts of time on pages. He's like, "You can't do it." So he was kind of my mentor for that. It's like, as much as you'd like to thing into something, that, is like spectrum bound or any type of, super finesse piece of art. It's a piece of production and, money off of selling it. So just do what you best you can in the amount of time. And
well, and by the time we get it, like, if the artist gets behind and the inker gets behind, well, that cuts the colorist time down too. So there's sometimes where you like, okay, well, you have to get, like towards some of the end of Doomsday Clock, I had to do like 5 pages a day just to meet the deadline. And it was like brutal, long days, like it sucked. But you just have to do that sometimes, right? So I couldn't go back and like, I would change stuff later if there was something but otherwise, yeah. And there's usually times where, you start a big sequence and okay, well, this sequence is going to take the first half of the book. Like say it's a big fight scene in a certain location. So the first page of that sequence, when you start making all your color choices, then it might pigeonhole you later on in the story. So I spend most of my time on the first page of the sequence because that sets up your entire scene. So it takes a lot of time.
And I think tying it back to asking about color theory is like knowing color theory is, I think, often comes in it becomes the most helpful in these scenarios where you're rushed for time, and it just allows you to make decisions a little quicker. So this previous scene was X. The next scene should be Y because that will look best, coming right after, so it's like that you don't get bogged down and trying to make decisions. Cause I think a lot of the coloring, the time in coloring for me is in the decision-making process, and actually executing it is probably, a little bit less time. And so knowing the color theory and knowing when to break it and how to use it and how to break it, they're just good tools to have in your bag, as opposed to going, I don't know what I want to do. Let me try this. It doesn't work, and I don't know why it doesn't work. I mean, sometimes that also happen when you're just in a funk or whatever, but usually you can do something and you go, that's not working because of this, but I could fix it by doing, this other thing. And that's why I would suggest kind of diving into color theory and figuring out what works and doesn't work if you're interested in coloring.
But let me play devil's advocate here. Is it really color theory, or is it really the experience you had from doing? And now by instinct is like this is what it works. And
well, I mean, it started as color. Yeah, I took a color theory course in art school, so I mean, my instinct is just what I was taught plus all my experience combined into now my current decision making. So yeah, it's a crucial building block in there for sure to begin with.
This is like I always say to young artists, you gotta learn to walk before you learn how to run. Power without control. In the end, if you don't have that tool, even if you don't use it, that's why I was asking about color theory. In many cases, I think you just don't use it because you guys have it so ingrained and your experience is there. You don't even think you're using color theory, but you do it anyway because that's part of the training wheels, right?
Yeah, I mean, I still think back to a color theory assignment in my college color theory course where it clicked for me that different hues, the value range in different colors, and how much more you can get out of say blue than you can get out of red, in terms of values, and I'm trying to think of another good example, like yellow or what, like there's just certain colors where you're like, I'm trying to get this really light red and it's always coming out as pink or, like I remember that kind of information clicking, from a college color theory course. So yeah, I mean, I still think about that kind of stuff.
Well, and that's the stuff that you use a lot too, right? So yeah. I have a tendency to always go to greens because you can get so many warm, cool tonal values with the green. So, and you can make it, you know, dirty, more of a mossy, like a versatile color to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get to the point where you don't even think about it. You're just you're just automatically doing it. But I always keep like a color wheel next to me. So if I'm starting a cover and I'm like, wow, I'd like to do the background, you know, some reds or something. And, you know, this, you know, character has a certain type of color. Well, then I kind of glance at the color wheel, okay, complementary, and I'll just kind of push it a little bit here and there just to get that separation. So yeah, you always keep that in mind.
But it's also part of it that is based on I guess that you need to know the artist you're working with, right? To know what to apply in that sense. And this is a question for all of you. Imagine I'm your editor. Consider yourself lucky I'm not. But imagine I am, and I ask you, okay, what phase of the work of the artist would you like to see the art? And I mean, do you want me to send you the layouts? Do you want me to send you the pencils, or do you want me to send you the inks? Do you want to see the whole process so you can start thinking what you're going to do in the page? Or you're fine with, with the inks, I'm fine. Because it depends on the case. If I were in your position, I would always think. That's why I'm not a colorist, by the way. So good for you. Like, I would always think I would like to see the layouts, because that starts my thinking process, because I see the artist thinking process too. But in some other cases, people just tells me, no, I just need to see the inks, because that's the final and that's what I want to start thinking. And I could get confused. So what do you guys? What's the phase of the work that you feel comfortable with, in terms of what you need to see to get your brains starting to think about it?
To me, it relates to your previous question of if we could just survive economically on coloring one book a month, would we do it? If it was that perfect world scenario or something, let me see it all. But you try to send me layouts and I'm coloring a different book, that week. I'm like, just
leave me alone. Frankie?
Well, yeah, go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer just to see the inks. I mean, most of the books that I work on, again, I get pages by dribble. So nothing ever comes in as one piece. It's either chronology, or it's like someone's working here, then they start working there, and so then you have to make things work in the middle where things start meeting. It's like, okay, I started over here and I started over here. Now, how does this other part going to work now that these two pieces are coming together? But yeah, I mean, most of the time I don't have a lot of time to preview and think and to get into the issue. And sometimes, depending on what's going on with the palette of what I want to do, once I start getting into it, I'll look online for some inspirations. Like, okay, there's either a piece of art that I really like the way they use the colors, something complementary. So I'll kind of like try to bring some of that element into something that I'm working on, because I know the characters that I'm working on, and I think this would kind of be a good environment for it. But yeah, until I get the inks and I can kind of look over the script a little bit, if something's just not self-explanatory, I think the inks are just what I'd rather have.
Yeah, I'd be the same. I always have the script first. I always get the script way ahead of time, way before I get the artwork. Or I talk to the writer or the artist before, which gives me, they usually give me a heads up on certain things. But yeah, I always go through the script before I'll read the script for each sequence, and then that'll tell me kind of what to expect. So when I get the artwork, I already have it visualized from the script, and then I just go from there. But the script is huge for me, because a lot of times a writer will put in, certain notes, or, oh, it's daytime or nighttime, and some don't, and which drives me bananas when the writer doesn't put. Oh, and then I hand it in. They're like, "Oh, that's supposed to be a nighttime scene." I'm like, "Well, okay, put that in the friggin' script."
Yeah. And
then so I got to redo it or tone stuff down. But yeah, but I've been really lucky. I work with some good guys that way. Yeah, but the script's huge first for me.
Would you have the experience to have editors who didn't want to send you scripts?
No.
No. Maybe they just don't get back to you in time, or just more of a communication issue than like they're they're not messing you up on purpose. It's,
No, if I don't, I just ask for it and they just get it.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of notes, even color notes in the script too. Then
Yeah, absolutely.
locations and that kind of thing. So
or like emotional subtext or something that it can.
I'm not asking about current or Marvel or what's happening with DC, but I remember, say like 10 years ago, there was like a couple of years when I don't know if it was an edict or something, and I won't say which publisher it was. When I got the emails from the colorist, like a lot, telling me to send in the script, and I was like, "What? Why do you have it?" Like, no, the editors are not sending this to us. So that's why I'm asking, if it happened to you guys back in the day, because it was like a weird time for a year or two when that was happening.
Oh,
I never knew why, to be honest. But
no, I mean, it still happens occasionally.
Right. Yeah, it's everything's due. They got editors have a million books they're editing. Blah blah blah. Like, it happens, but I've never seen. It's never seemed intentional. It's always just seemed a product of the production's pace.
Mm-hmm. Doigan Swift says, "Thanks for putting together this talk and to the guests sharing their knowledge today. Very interesting. Thanks to you for watching, Doig." And Jen Bartel, great talk, guys. It feels like colorists are doing more heavy lifting than ever before in comics, but the industry still isn't really giving most appropriate credit for that. Good to lift the veil a bit. Two things. If you're Jen Bartel, the artist, I've sent you 2 emails inviting you to the show. So please check them out. Now that you're here, I can say it. And the second thing, you're amazing. You're amazing
talk
artist.
about a great colorist.
Exactly. And the third thing, this is what I do Jen. I'm trying to do at least once a month. A color artist. I don't like to call them colorists. It's color artists because they're artists. A color artist panel, so people knows a lot more about this, because it's not only essential. I think it's one of the biggest part comics has today, and they deserve more recognition because, heavy lifting, quality, the final product. What these guys do can lift up just a good comics to an exceptional one. That's it, and that's what I'm saying. Alex Guimaraes says, "Great team, amazing colors here." Eduardo Sacristan Puch, hello to all. Hello to you guys, and just send questions. And agree with Jen. These guys are amazing, and color art should have a lot more recognition than it has. So now let me ask you a question that is, I want to create controversy, just because I'm an asshole. Is it true, the legend? I know it's not, but you know this. The legend of if you have to do flat colors is much faster and easier than doing volumetric colors. Let's go with that. Matt, what do you say about that?
Like I said earlier, a lot of times my decision making is the longest part of my process. So oftentimes doing flat colors, I spend a whole lot of time just thinking about the color choices, because I know the color I pick on a flat colored book has got to kind of nail it just by itself. I can't fall back on, doing some rendering later. Like, this face doesn't, this figure in the foreground's not really working. I'll fix it later with some rim lighting or some modeling. So like, in some ways, I don't think flat colors is any easier. I think they both have their challenge. Both styles of coloring have their challenges. But yeah, I think it's a myth that flat coloring is just inherently easier.
That's why I want to kill the myth, because I think it's a stupid myth. And it's like, there's a lot of things you can fall on with volumetric colors that you just literally can't with flat colors. So so when I hear, oh, it's easier, it's like, no, there's tools you have one in one that you can't use in the other. So that automatically denies the myth. But I want people to know it because they see flat colors. Can you repeat, please, Frankie?
You can fail miserably both. I've seen people that have tried to either hide stuff in volumizing. That's like, what the fuck are you thinking? It's like that forehead looks like it's Rocky Dennis, or or if you go to flat colors, it's if you're really not pushing enough contrast or enough like total saturation and versus non-saturation, it's again it can just be a disaster. So yeah, it's a lot of I mean, they can be both very difficult if you want to do it well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Brad?
Yeah, I mean, the flat color, you really got to be on point, right? With rendering, you could always you could bring in a side light, or you can kind of do some other things, you know, deeper shadow or something with a lighter background. But when it's flat color, like it's a talent for sure. Like I find it a lot harder. I find it takes more time when you want to have something more simple, because it has to be perfect, right?
Yeah, because you don't have. That's why I was asking, because Matt, I think you don't have a safety net with flat colors, really, right? You know, with rendering, with volumetric colors, as I call them. Correct me if I'm wrong calling them that. But if you with volumetric colors, you have escape in a way.
Yeah.
But with flat colors, you just because everything is there, right?
Yeah. And like Frank said, I can attest to what Frank said. I have failed miserably at both, so I know they're both very hard.
Yeah, same here. Jeez.
Yeah. So it's. I remember my first one of my when I went to art school, there's some comic. It was a comics degree they offered, actually. So I like had some comics courses, including coloring. And like I don't think our professor let us render. It was like a 10-week course. Like I don't think he let us render until like the final assignment, like, you know, all 9.5 weeks or 9 weeks or whatever. He made us color. Like we would do some rendering exercises, but like when any projects that were coloring comic pages, he kind of discouraged us from rendering, because he was trying to teach us to get our ideas across with as few tools as possible. You know, I say tools, you know, to just use flat colors and not fall back on rendering. And we were all young and we sucked at rendering anyway, so it's not like we would have made the pages any better. But anyway, yeah. So that always stuck with me, of like, if you know, it's very hard to get your ideas across with just flat color. So yeah, I think it is definitely a myth. I agree with you that it is a myth. That is not true.
Mm-hmm. Do you think
when we used to do marker guides, it forced you to really use color theory, you know, contrasting colors, because once you lay the marker down, you know, you can't Command Z the thing and, you know, whatever. You can't undo it and redo it. Like you're just constantly trying to make decisions before you put the marker down.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about it a lot before, and I still use that stuff now.
I think like sometimes even when I'm not coloring a book with flat colors, if I'm doing a lot of rendering, my thought process always kind of starts more in line with what you would think of as flat colors. I think of, you know, large scale kind of macro or whatever, like it's, you know, what's my foreground, middle ground, background in this panel or this cover or this whatever, and literally to the point where, like, I guess I could, in my head, I'm reducing it to like 3 colors. You know, how am I separating this image, this panel, this cover, into foreground, middle ground, background, to add depth and to push the eye where I want it to. I don't want the foreground stuff's inconsequential. I want you looking in the middle ground. So how am I gonna do that? And even if there's then 600 little things for me to color within that image after that step, like, you know, I'm still visualizing it first and as kind of as flat as you can possibly take it, because I like organizing the image in that way is the most important, and then all the added detail later is just that, it's just added. It's not as important to getting across what the image is trying to get to the reader.
Mm-hmm. Are you Frankie, are you of the school that less is more in comics? You know when you need to know when to stop overworking something, or you are of the school of, if this needs 2 hours just for one panel, I'm gonna spend them until it's perfect?
No, you know, we always had a rule, was just, you know, keep it as simple as possible. You know, it's if you try to make something look like it's not complicated, that's usually more difficult than overcomplicating a piece. I mean, because you can throw a million lines and a million selections and the highlights and pencil lines, and, you know, it'll look the way it looks, but to really make something look simple and smooth or dynamic, it doesn't take that much. It's just, again, it's the decisions you're making to make it that way. And like my mentor, actually, Steve Furco, the best thing he always taught me about when starting pages is throw color around. So, if you're not sure about what you're going to do on a page, just start throwing loose colors around and seeing how things affect or how it looks. And, because it might open your mind up to something new on the thing, especially like covers. Because, if you're working on a cover that's just isolated, you can throw this around. It's like it doesn't work, undo it, but just kind of broad strokes to get your idea, and then whittle it back to the finished piece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me see. Jen Martel says, haha, oh my God, I'm sorry. Don't worry. Just answer my email and we'll set a date for Eduardo Sacristan puts, do you usually get recommendations from the penciler on your own work? Matt?
Sometimes, if some pencilers, if they think in color, like if they see their art in color and they have ideas, I'm happy to incorporate it. I'd rather hear those ideas up front and be able to incorporate them in my decisions rather than hear nothing from them and then turn it in and get a bunch of notes. So yeah, I'm open to it. I don't mind at all. I want them to be happy with the finished art as well. It's a collaborative process. So yeah, I'm okay with that. As like I said, it's only annoying when it's like, oh, I wanted that red, but I never told you. It's like that's annoying.
That happens more than you think too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, but I'm also fortunate, and probably the rest of the guys here too. But like that, I have a lot of longstanding collaborative relationships, or with some artists that I've worked with for a long time, where I either kind of know what they like, or we have a good process where they give me really relevant notes ahead of time. So like Russell Dowderman and I really like over the years back and forth from all the way from like how he sets his files up, because he draws digitally, to the kind of things he likes in color and some of the things he doesn't care for as much, or I like all that input. I mean, this comics being a collaborative medium is, I think, one of its strengths and one of the things I enjoy. Kind of going back to the question you asked, what brings us back? I mean, getting that back and forth with another artist and collaborating on this stuff is, to me, it's part of the enjoyment of the job. So I like hearing from the artists, unless they're giving me bad suggestions. But
how do you guys, does it happen to you, Frank? For example, Frankie, does it happen to you with artists that work digitally now, that do you have to tell them how to work with layers? So they don't send you like 100 layers per in any panel that drives you crazy and makes your work impossible?
Not really. I mean, like, especially like with Kafu, he'll set the layers up. Usually he does all his tones within 3 layers, and then he'll have usually 1, maybe 2 effect layers. Mm-hmm. So like before I send it off flats, I'll duplicate the image, save the image, flatten the image without the effects, send out the flatting, and then when it comes back time after all the rendering's done, I can just reapply the effects. Mm-hmm. So you kind of get used to it, and and you can push and pull with the levels a little more, but it begins. Once you start doing it again, when it's new, it's more difficult, and once you start doing it more often, it becomes kind of second nature. It's like, I know how to do this. If I can back off, because like if you're certain things tonally, especially in gray tones, are gonna print darker. You back out some of the gray tones and try to lay more color into it so it doesn't just mud out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me see. Alex Guimaraes says, I'm a colorist too, and I studied a lot of what you guys have done. So thank you, Brad, Poncer, and Frankie. Have been my references forever. And Kelly tells you are all beasts together. And Eduardo Sacristan says, and this is for you, Brad. So I think that all of you prefer an artist that likes to collaborate rather than being an isolated part of the process.
Yeah, it's a total team effort. So the more you communicate with, like a lot of times before, let's say I start a cover, I'll send an email to the artist and the writer and say, any comments or concerns before I start, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, usually no. But I just find it helps. There might be something little that they forgot or that type of thing. But otherwise, yeah, it's a huge team effort. So
mm-hmm. How much do you think that something like pattern recognition is important for you as colorists, and for you as color artists. I mean, knowing when, and this is something I was touching on before with when I asked about, less is more. In many cases, I see that the best colorists, and you are certainly, you three are among that top group for me and for the rest of the world, because we have eyes. But for me, this is really important to know when something doesn't need to be completely finished or rendered, because that I always use this example. I'm sorry, this may be stupid. I'm a caveman, and when we were cavemen, a bush was rustling, you are like, jump and run away, because probably there's an animal there that's going to kill me.
Okay.
And this is what I think we are still cavemen in a big part of our brain, and we still know things that we don't need to finish them because our brain is going to complete them.
Yeah.
How important is for you as color artists to know, the reader is going to know that, so I don't need to over render or finish it. Give him a space. Give her a space.
You don't have to color, grass green, and you're still gonna know it's grass, right? So, which is a huge bonus. It's a bonus element when you're doing color stuff. So, like, you don't have to do water blue, that type of thing. But
yeah, I think it's big. That everything you said, David, is very forefront in my mind when I'm coloring, especially because I'm not particularly good at doing the volumetric colors at rendering. I don't color realistically, I guess, quote unquote. I color, I guess, a little more stylistically, like as far as my color choices and palettes and stuff. So I rely a lot on what the reader brings to the equation, because it's for whatever reason my brain just doesn't work that way, where I'm not that interested in rendering armor or every blade of grass and that kind of thing. It's just not what I'm excited about or what I'm interested in doing. So a lot of my decisions are based on what the reader's brain will complete. Like I said, a lot of things you just said are thoughts almost word for word that pop up in my brain. And in terms of pattern recognition, another thing that came to my mind was a lot of times, you'll have a certain sequence, say a fight sequence or a tense conversation or some sequence of images in a comic that has a ebb and a flow to it, as it, and in my brain, I see those backgrounds, even if they're like, say, blank backgrounds across a fight scene, there are certain beats in the storytelling that should have more or less impact than other beats around them. So I try to also inform the reader of those beats by like picking slightly different background colors or changing the palette, for an emotional moment or things like that. I think all of that plays into what you're saying about how the human brain just kind of subconsciously recognizes patterns, even if you're not really in their face with it.
And in the case of storytelling, using that as a storytelling tool, and again, this is how important color art is for storytelling right now, you guys. If you don't know it, it doesn't mean you don't notice it as a reader, because it's there. These guys can tell you, changing a hue a little bit from dark green to light green, or with yellows or reds or something. They're telling you something is going to happen, and you consciously, maybe you're not noticing it, but it's there. So just something I ask you to check as often as you can, how the color is telling you the story, because in many cases, the art, being as good as the art is not telling you the story in certain things. And that's why I think, Brad, is so important, as you said, to read the script, because sometimes as a color artist, doesn't happen to you guys. And again, I'm not criticizing the art. I'm not criticizing pencils or inks. The art comes here, and you know it. I need to punch it here because the script is asking for this emotion, and it's not in the art. And it's not in the art, right?
yeah, for sure.
So how much do you think that, in terms of storytelling, the colors can guide the mood and the emotions of a reader, Frankie?
I think pretty strongly. I mean, there, I remember, God, this is years ago. I think when Liquid was doing like a book about certain color expressions, they would show some of their pieces, and it was like, like dramatically flame, dramatically cold. It's like the same image but colored in a bunch of different ways to try to show how the piece and the emotion behind it would change. And we did that to an extent back at Crosstown ages ago. There was a thing when we did this Art of Crosstown vanity book or whatever, and it was like we had an illustration, and basically I think all the colorists in the studio had to color, and so it's just like how everybody else would take one image and their different visions of what that one image would turn out to be like. So it's and again, it goes all over the place. So it was a barbarian with a moon, so some people make it warm, so it goes to cold to dramatic and total fantasy with colors that don't really work or do work but in a different way. So again, it's it kind of is up to us. And the only thing that's somewhat disheartening is with us especially working, and our final results are determined by a print house. So by the time if we work on something and we get it to where on our screen it looks fine, and then by the time it gets to the printer and comes out, it's like, what the fuck? It's like I just had that with a bunch of my covers too that printed really dark. I had one cover that came out early that printed fine, and then okay, that's how it's going to print. Then I got another copy of it and it's just mud. So it's just like, again, you kind of got to let it go because it's production art. But it's like sometimes it's disheartening when you really have something you spent time on trying to make it look good and everybody else likes it, and by the time it actually reaches the public that's buying it, it's a poor representation of what it originally was.
Yeah, that's the most frustrating. If you're trying to be super subtle with the color or a gradation, you want to introduce a little tinge of a different color, and then you see it in print and it's like, oh my god, it's not at all what that's. I kind of like seeing images on social media or digitally because they're almost more of a true, because they're backlit, right? So all the colors seem to be nice and bright, but as soon as you get it in print, I noticed too if I get trade paperbacks or collections printed, it always seems super dark for some reason. I don't know why, but
maybe because they don't adapt the amount of black ink to the difference in paper. You have this paper, this many grams for the monthly book, and then different gradation for the paperback, and they don't adapt it.
We have color settings for different types of paper.
Yeah.
So the stuff I'm working on now, I use 0 block in the mix because the way it's going to print. So even if I put 5% block, I know it's going to muddy it up. So I just don't use any block in the colors. But I kind of like the movie, like the color in movies I kind of look at more. Like I like that kind of stuff. So if I want to go really dark in certain areas, I really got to watch it because I know it's going to print like garbage. So
yeah, but how can you do it? How can you do it in terms of what do I mean? As you were saying, Brad, Frankie, how can you even think about it? Because if you know it's going to print in a different way, do you have conversations with your editors, or even have time to just discuss?
Yeah, you do. Like you talk about it. There's sometimes where an editor say, "Oh, this sequence came out a little dark," so I could just go in to hue saturation. I could brighten it up a touch, or I really watch my numbers in my color sliders. Yeah, and then you use a lot of like tone too, right? Like values and that kind of thing. So sometimes I'll really push the fact, like behind this main character in this panel, I want it super light, either color or tone, and then I can have the character in shadow. So even if it does print a little dark, you're still going to get that same effect with the separation, right? And then you could add a bit of side light in to, have a really nice sharp side light or an off light casting on them.
Yeah, but you can also, what I was meaning to ask, Frank, is that do you really have the chance to, when you see a page in print and then talk to your editor and say, hey, this printed a bit dark, or can I change it for the trade? This is something that you can usually, you can often do it, or this is, you're too tight on time to do these things.
Well, I mean, like with certain editorial, I've talked with them and they said, okay, well, you need to change this. I go, so am I changing all of my settings because, they're shipping to different printers. So different printers are setting up different things. And it's like, well, we're trying this new printer and the printer's at fault for this. So I go, if I change everything on my end and the printer gets it right, then it goes the opposite direction. And then I've got everything all washed out and there's no volume to anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, it happened back, I think, on one of my Symbiote covers to where I did this really heavy brush, grungy, texture painted background. And on screen, it looks fine. There's no issues. But, when that printed, everything get just sucked up and darkened up. And the same with the interior, too, though. So it's just, I had Greg, the illustrator, coming over to me. He's like, I don't know what happened. Looking at me, it's like, I didn't change anything. It's not my end. And then by the time we find the editors at Marvel on the horn, it's like, it's nobody's fault. It's, the printer didn't, calibrate right. So, so I'm like, just, don't throw the book at me because, I'm just doing what I do. And, everybody else, I think it did really well in previews. So whatever. It's, it's just, the final, there's still just some variables that you just can't keep, can't be compensated for until they just are.
Yeah, absolutely. We get sometimes, well, we've been getting lately, this new printer we're using, they print dark. So, do less black on your covers because they print too dark. And you're like, okay, can the printer change their settings? Because this is happening in the last 3 months for an amount of different artists, not for the same, and you're asking us to change, but it should be the printer who changes it, right? So by the end of the day, you don't even know what's going to happen until you see it. It's like, oh, but you told us to go less dark, and it's not printing, dark enough because what did the printer do? So you don't even know what to do in those cases, right?
Well, a lot of it I use is the type of paper.
Because they're not giving you test pages to compare.
No.
Let me see here. Matt, Eduardo Sacristan, I had arrived later, but how was the process of learning how to use digital colors? The process from some years ago to colorists, for colorists, to now in the coloring process has evolved incredibly in a few years.
Yeah, some of the Frank and Brett, they referenced like doing guides with markers, because they're older than me. Sorry, guys.
You don't say older. You just say big. They're big.
But I when I was younger, as a kid or whatever, I colored with markers and whatever. And then right as I was getting into coloring comics professionally, like the marker stuff was kind of dying out, and all the digital was taking over. So I was lucky enough to learn the digital coloring kind of in college, real basic stuff, Photoshop. But I don't even remember what Photoshop was. It was 4 maybe or 5. I don't know. It was a long, long time ago. And so I'm lucky enough that I got basically, aside from being a kid using crayons and markers and paints, like I basically have only really colored digitally, at least, professionally. So for me, it was, pretty easy to it became second nature pretty quick. But yeah, it has come a long way because I started with just a mouse, there was no tablets or the Cintiq, the monitors, tablet monitors. So.
Adam Hughes still colors with his mouse, right?
I've heard that. I have heard that.
And when he was here, he showed us how he colors, and like 60% of the audience were like, "What the fuck? How do you do that?" Nobody believed it. Like, no, that's not. He doesn't do it that way. Like, and he was like,
Adam Hughes.
Yeah, Adam Hughes. With this mouse, it's like he showed me this is the same mouse I've been using for coloring the last 15 years. And everybody was like, "What?"
Yeah, which just goes to show this is all just tools. It matters how you use it. It doesn't necessarily matter so much what the tool is.
No, it's not the tool; it's who handles it, right? It's the
Yeah.
talent. Let's be honest. You can use you can have the best tools in the world, but if you don't have it in your brain or in your talent, it doesn't matter. By the end of the day, everybody's going to know you're a hack with amazing tools.
Yeah.
Let's say it this way. Brad,
Yeah.
how was it for you, the transition, from if there was a transition for you, as Eduardo was asking, for more traditional coloring to the digital world?
Well, I love the technology now. Like when we started, it was a pain because it would always crash and it would take forever to do, like I said, a gradation or rendering or anything. And the files, it was huge to save the files. Computers just weren't where they are now. But now the ones you have, I love it. Like the Photoshop is fast. Like everything is super slick. You're not spilling paint, so your markers aren't running out of ink. It's way better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it.
What about you, Frankie? Do you miss the traditional ways at all?
Not really as much. I mean, it was again at a learning. So I, was still learning some basic rendering and everything back then, but I'm like one of those guys that's kind of archaic. I mean, up in last year, I was still using Photoshop 5.5 from me. So it's just a lot of us just got so used to that program. But again, it's so limiting. Brush sizes capped at 1,000 pixels. There's a lot of effects, and you can only use a 32-bit operating system. So when I finally delved in, and I still don't use CC, I actually use CS6. Because it was the last version of Photoshop that didn't have to be online supported. So use Adobe. Well, they're having issues with Adobe. I'm not having those issues, and it's still comparable as far as the brush engines and sizes, everything else. But there's a learning curve. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with the way the computers work now. Glitchy every now and then, depending on certain plugins, will slow down. I noticed recently I was working on cover this weekend and I couldn't get the damn file to work or stay open, and my brush strokes were taking forever. I had like 7 layers on it, and the file was like probably close to like 400 megabytes at one time, and so everything was my damn OneDrive backing up at the same time that I'm to work. So I'm like, shit. It's like I'm wondering why I can't use my pencil without it. But no, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way modern color has evolved where it is. I think the only reason to go back to the original stuff is if you're going to try to resell some type of original, like Joe Chido did with his guide stuff that was just amazing back in the early 90s. I think he was probably the best guidist that it had been in existence.
Mm-hmm. I think I saw, also Steve Olive. I think he also sold the Avengers Forever ones, and those were also beautiful. Adriano Lucas, another amazing color artist. Hi guys, a big hug here from Brazil. Let me see. Rita Carambola asks, could you tell us about any traditional colorist who has been a great influence for you and why? Brad?
Jeez, I don't know. I kind of look at a lot of different guys. Like I love Dave McKeag's stuff. Mm-hmm. I like Matt Hollingsworth. Like tons of people. Current stuff. Yeah, I mean, I look at stuff, a lot of it like on social media, online, where it's different than what I would do. Mm-hmm. I just like that. Like, I never even thought of doing something like that. I don't know. But there's one thing I want to mention before, like, especially with the new Photoshop stuff. Yeah. I love the CC Photoshop CC because the cloud. Say if we go on a trip or something, I could take my work computer, like a laptop and a tablet and stuff, and I just open up my Photoshop, click on the cloud, and my stuff is right there, ready to go, which is really nice. Like before, you'd have to, back it up or transfer it to a laptop. Now everything's right there. It transfers to an iPad, and it's all like your workflow is so much easier now too, especially for traveling conventions. If you have a cover due, I just got to open up my device and it's right there. I just click on my cloud and I just have it really accessible.
Yeah, some people who has moved from Photoshop because they're tired of it to Affinity. They're telling me that one of the main reasons they changed is because they have Affinity has apps for almost anything you can imagine, so you can just move from one to the other, and you just pop, and you have the work where you have it, and then in your Mac or whatever, and then on your iPad, and then on your phone, whatever, just pop, you continue from one to the other.
And that's how the Photoshop is now too. You can sync your brushes, so you open it up and it's all right there. Like your workspace is exactly the same. You can load your workspace, save it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it.
That's amazing. Matt, so the tools of the trade. You're a Photoshop guy, or you also use, Clip Studio, Affinity, Corel Painter. Tell me, do you use Corel Painter?
I'm a Photoshop guy, just because that's what I learned on, and that was just kind of what everyone was. I mean, that was kind of the only option, I guess, when I was, getting into it at like 2000, like in college, in 2000, 2001. I think Photoshop 5.5 was mentioned earlier. I think that's the one I might have learned on, or the one before it. And yeah, so it's just I resisted going over to the CC stuff, the Adobe, the stuff you have to subscribe to for a long time, but eventually gave in. And yeah, so I'm on Photoshop, and then I have a Cintiq tablet monitor. And then I do work on the road sometimes, and I have like a Cintiq Wacom makes a Mobile Studio Pro, so I work on that. Yeah, so that's a PC, and then my home setup is on a Mac. So I think that kind of covers all my tools of the trade.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work on this. I do keep one older version, like I think Photoshop 2015 or something, because I used to have this Knowles lens flare software. So you get all the wicked lens flare stuff, but they stopped making it usable with anything after 2015. So I could open it 2015 and use it if I need it. But yeah, that's a really cool software. Yeah.
You just said lens flare, so we know who to blame for J.J. Abrams movies.
Well, yeah, it's those ones.
It was all you. It was all you. He saw it in your work.
No. But there's times where, and you can manipulate. Yeah, it's just incredible. I just love it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
And so you're also a Photoshop guy. You don't use any other apps or programs.
Procreate too on an iPad and stuff like that with a pencil.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, strictly I've been using Photoshop since version 0.2 or something like that. So,
hey Brad, do you do any like finished work in Procreate or on your iPad? Like, do you do like pages to be printed on that?
I was messing with the cover, but I don't have enough memory on it, and yeah, it was just taking way too long. But I'll mess around with it quite a bit that way, just trying different.
A lot of people is telling me that they color with Clip Studio on the iPad, like finish, pieces.
Right.
But I think Procreate is more. Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, but Procreate is more to play with it, for sketching and layouts, right?
Yeah. I mean, depends how big your tablet is or your iPad.
Yeah.
Kind of delegates how many layers you can have. So.
Yeah, Cafu, for example, Frankie uses the iPad Pro, the 13-inch one, to do the whole thing. So, and I believe he does it in Clip Studio. So, and what are your tools, Frankie? Only Photoshop or something?
Old school. I just use Photoshop. I also don't use a Cintiq. I just use the old tablet, and I actually switched because I've had a Wacom into it before, and it was somehow glitching out on me. So I actually went the cheap route and bought on. It's actually been working even better for like. So I was gonna buy another pin because my Intuos pin chipped out. I was like, so for $60 I could buy another pin, or for 70 I could buy a whole new tablet. So I tried the.
We're losing you.
Yeah, I think what's it, Sanchez that does Jimenez's colors, George Jimenez. I think he does. I saw on social media, on Twitter there, that he's working with Procreate doing colors.
Who? Sorry.
Sanchez.
Alejandro Sanchez.
Yeah, I think he's doing using Procreate and an Apple iPad.
In an iPad Pro, yeah.
Doing colors. Yeah, I saw it on his social media. I was kind of taking a peek.
Wow,
Yeah,
I thought he was using Clip Studio on the iPad. I didn't know it was Procreate. Wow. Didn't know Procreate can do that.
Yeah, I've watched a bunch of videos of various people who've colored on some iPad apps, because I think I fantasize about that. Like, oh yeah, I could just color anywhere. This thing's light and small, and sitting on an airplane, or sitting on the beach.
I know a lot of people who colors on the iPad, in the iPad Pro and the iPad Air, the new one, because that's the one I have, the iPad Air, and it's almost as powerful as the iPad Pro. The problem is that the iPad Pro is bigger. It's a 13 inch, the other one is 11. And I've seen a lot of people coloring in iPad with Affinity or with Clip Studio. Less people with the Photoshop, because they say that this is the Photoshop is still too limited. But what I was telling to Brad is that I hadn't heard from about Procreate being used to color an actual book, to print. So that's fascinating to know you can also do that.
But I'm really old school. Like, I've been using Photoshop for over 20 years. So like, for me to be efficient, and I know exactly, my brushes, everything, it's right there. So I'm not going to start jumping around.
Yeah, of course.
I'll do mess around.
Yeah, that's how it is for me. Usually it's like, I don't feel like I have enough time to learn a whole new program or a whole new workflow. So that kind of keeps me from moving over to some different software or different tools, because what I have works, and I've got, 3 books to finish or something, so it's like,
until they don't give you another choice but to change, right? The program starts crashing or not working, or the implementation drives you crazy. So you know what? You're giving me no other choice than to change.
I was the same as Frankie, whereas I was using the old versions. I'm like, I don't want to change. I have it dialed in exactly how I like it. But then all these updates, and I thought, well, I better start updating, because otherwise it's going to be too far gone.
Right.
And so now with the new updates, now the workflow is way better. I could jump to a laptop, or we could travel. it's just way nicer than what it used to be. So that's what I like now.
Kelly Fitzpatrick. Kelly was saying, Olive, about the color guides. Olive Akira pages. I have some saved pages from Daniel Bozzo too. That's amazing. The color guides are something amazing to look at. And she also says, Matt says, I'm using Matt's Intuos 3 right now. Haha.
Yeah, I sold it to her, gave it to her. Yeah, I wasn't using it anymore.
So Kelly asked, have you found that since COVID you're working on more and more graphic novels or less monthlies? Any of you?
No difference for me, but pretty much same as I've been pre-COVID as far as workflow.
As far as doing more or less of one?
Kelly was asking if you guys are doing more graphic novels instead of monthlies, or the workflow is the same.
No, I found that the COVID stuff actually gave me a chance to get caught up, because the shipping and everything was delayed. So, but they just kept my work schedule the same. So I think I was working on my Action Comics run with Klaus and John Romita Jr. And we got pretty far ahead. I think I was doing Detective at the same time with Brad Walker. So I got to work on those. I still kept my regular deadlines. And then they had it, a couple months ahead of time. So it worked out really good, which is it never happens.
Exactly. And you also had the amazing opportunity that you have 2 guys that are really good at monthlies. So you could all get ahead, which is something that we never see, right? Well, it happened with Frankie and Spider-Woman, right? And with Pere, because he's a full monthly guy, and you guys could get ahead with a Spider-Woman, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
But it's one of those things. It's a
Hang on,
balance.
I'm losing
You gotta
signal.
just keep in mind it's a commercial art, and you have deadlines, and you just do what you can, right?
Yeah, exactly. You have to do it with with the tools and the time you have. Ali
Well,
Guimaraes is saying Jerome Rauch does an amazing pro work using Clip Studio. Yeah, what we're saying, that's the amazing thing now, is that even if you prefer to stay faithful between brackets with the tool you've always used, which is Photoshop, is that at any given time, if you guys get tired of it, or you feel it's like a dead end tool, you can just go and move to something else. But back in the day, there was Photoshop and Photoshop, right? It's like you didn't even have the choice. Well, it was as I was I was kidding with Matt before. It was Photoshop or Coral Paint. That's what the only thing you had, and you certainly didn't want to use Coral Painter, right?
I mean, it was a whole different thing. I don't know if comics coloring feels so natural in Photoshop because that's all we kind of had to begin with. But I think a lot of the other programs, I mean, it's changing now from what I've seen of like Clip Studio and stuff. Like there are other competitors that are much closer to what we're used to if we've only colored in Photoshop. But yeah, for the longest time, there would be neat programs that would come up, but it would be like, wow, that's so different than how I work in Photoshop that I'd have to spend a whole bunch of time just relearning how to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the other stuff, they're very similar to Photoshop anyway. Like Procreate's very similar. It's a layer based, and
right.
a
lot.
brush.
Yeah, it's all. I think I'm probably missing out on a lot of interesting, tools and opportunities as far as how or where I can work because I'm just staying stuck in my ways and my tools. But I realize that it's just there's often not time to stop and learn something new. So.
No, it depends. Even the young guys learning now are learning way different than when I learned. But they're going to find their comfortable workstation, and then they're going to stick with that too, right? So
exactly, that's something I was going to mention. In the end, Matt, I don't think it's that much about the time or anything. It's even if we go back to if we have more time to do just one monthly. Would you change your tools if you have more time?
Right.
If you are comfortable, this is the thing it works. Why mess around with something that works, right?
Yeah, I don't think anyone would look to just go, I'm changing all my tools. I certainly think given time, you would look to add tools or add different process, to your work. But yeah, that's what I would do anyway if I had the time. And I've tried a little, I mess around on the iPad, but usually it's just like ends up with nothing, but it turned into a sketch pad essentially for me, which is a lot of money to spend on a sketch pad now that I say it. But yeah.
Okay. Alex Guimaraes asks, and this is for you, Frankie, how much cinema, real light, new media like video game influenced your work today or influenced it when you guys started?
Well, real life first. I mean, because you just see it all the time. You're how light affects things, and if you see something interesting, you kind of take a mental note when you're outside or something. It's like, holy shit, that looks really interesting. Cinema helps. Again, video games are all just extrapolations of real life and kind of pushing color and challenging the ideas of real life. One of the palettes I thought was like super interesting was like what was it? Damn, Star Trek Into Darkness, where they had like that whole red and white entrance scene. It was really stark, and it just So yeah, I mean, there's I draw some influence from anywhere. If I see something interesting, I'll try to recall it, or if I can't, I'll try to find a JPEG to say, what was that thing I was looking for? Hang on.
I lost sound.
Brad can't hear,
yeah.
or maybe
I couldn't hear Frankie at all.
There we go.
Hang on. And now my keyboard's in my face. I can't see anything.
Yeah, I hear you.
I hear you. I can hear you too.
Yeah, I think we're good.
I just can't see you guys. Am I still visible?
Yeah. Hear and see you.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm looking at a keyboard right now for some reason, talking to my cell phone. But yeah, so there's all types of things that are inspirational.
I can't hear
I
Frank
mean,
at all. Sorry.
But
uh,
Brad, can you hear me and Matt?
Yeah.
So only. That's weird because Matt, you can hear Frankie too, right?
Correct.
That's weird because we can hear Frankie, we can hear you.
Yeah.
then still,
No, he's I can't hear him at all.
That's weird.
Alright,
Because,
hang on.
so let me see.
Yeah, I pull all this. Just what Frank was saying. I pay attention to all that stuff. I like playing video games from time to time if I can get some spare time, and I like photography, and I enjoy watching movies. I mean, all of that stuff kind of sits in my brain and comes out on the page when I'm working. I take a lot of influence from. I probably take more influence from things outside of comics than I do inside of comics.
Yeah, because by the end of the day, Matt, Brad, and Frankie, for all of you, what you do is abstractions of reality. You abstract reality and make it in your own way. As just you were saying before, Matt, that you go more for stylized than realistic. But in a way, I don't agree, because I think that your stylization is the way you see life, and then
Yeah,
you put
I
life
agree.
through your senses and get it into the page. So I always say that there's only one thing that you can fake, and you are going to correct me because you're a colorist, and I said I am not. But I always say the same thing. Is one thing that you always see when you're a kid that stays in your head, which is the color of the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say when an artist colors, you don't even think about it, but the sky you're coloring, even if you're coloring New York or Paris or Madrid or any other town, the colors you're putting there is the colors you saw when you were a kid.
Yeah, sure.
So that's the lens that you create is what's on the page. So in the end, the colors, it's you in a way, right? It's your reality going through a lens.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
I'm a huge movie buff, and I like looking at manga stuff, and just tons of different influences just to see video game concept art, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I react to all of that, like, be it, you see something in real life, like you're at the edge of the Grand Canyon and you're blown away by what you're seeing, or, you're playing a video game and you're blown away by what you see, or you see someone's art and the same thing happens. Is usually my reaction is, wow, why do I like this? Like, what do I like about this? And then that's what I take from any of those influences and then try to apply to my work later of like, I really like the contrast of those cool shadows on the warm side of the rock, or, look how pale the sky is and how blue the ground, just so again, maybe it's because I know I can use it in my job later, but that's how I end up looking. Even at, like I said, I'm driving down the road and I'm looking at a sunset. I'm thinking that.
Does it happen to you guys that you can distinguish farm created, to say it in a way, or, greenhouse fruits, or, with, it happens to me with fruits, I can distinguish, like, because of how green, the hue of a fruit is, or the egg yolk. I'm looking at an egg yolk and I know where that egg came from because of, how pale or bright it is. Does it happen to you guys that even not noticing, you focus on those colors of the real life, fruits, or real life eggs or something like that? That it goes to your library of colors,
Oh yeah. I try to, like Matt was saying about seeing a certain sunset or something. I just try to, I got to remember this. Like, it's so awesome. So I'm constantly taking pictures of, you're walking, New York City streets at 1 a.m, and you look down the street and you just see this massive range of atmospheric perspective. So I take a picture of it. I'm like, I got to remember that. I want to use it. Like if I have a big fire in the back, in our back property or something, I'll take pictures of the ashes and the smoke and the sparks, and then I might use them in a page or something. I'll just transfer them into a channel. And
Frankie, but even when it's not related, right? I think that's the most fun could be, as I said, I was mentioning, the color of an egg yolk or an aubergine or something like that, or a pepper, like yellow bell pepper, and you suddenly realize that you can apply those colors, as I was saying, abstraction of reality. You can apply those colors to something that is not even related. It's not a bell pepper, but the color for that pepper, I can use it there. or the color from that joke on the or that aubergine or eggplant. Sorry, you're American, or that eggplant or anything like that. But at the end of the day, you are not limited, right? Reality is giving you the chances to get those colors and extract them and use them when you see them. It'll fit in your pages, right?
Well, for me, I think it's not just what I'm looking at. It's got to be it in the environment on how it works. So, I mean, because you know what that color is, but it's got to be something about how that color stands out against the environment or what it's doing while you're looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, because yeah, you can look at any color and go, I appreciate that color. But again, it's like photography, you know, when you're putting a certain color in an environment and you go, you know, I know that's just some stupid red metallic car, but the way they have it laying on a beach with water reflections and some cool tones coming through, you know, that's what makes the environment. So
it's still about, in the end, it's all about context, we can say.
I think so.
Brad is saying that you can, yeah,
You
that's
still can't hear me.
Yeah, I can't. I gotta go out and then come back in.
yeah, please, because it's really weird. That was wait. So Drink and Draw Costa Rica, Matt saying, hello guys, these anecdotes are great to school. Every job asks for a different distinctive palette, and every artist has his or her own palette or preferred range of colors. How can you merge both?
I mean, some of that for me when I'm approaching a job or an artist's style, it comes down to kind of what we were saying before about, you know, your personal or specific tastes. So I'll look at an art and I'll just kind of instinctively think, oh, I think it should be colored this way. And then obviously I will combine that with if the artist is asking for something specific. You know, a lot of times, like I said, so it'll start with just kind of how I see it in color. Because at this point, I think we'd all of us here would agree, like, because we've done it so much, is you can look at a black and white page and kind of see it colored how you think it should be colored, or how you'll see an art style and how you prefer to see that colored. So I get a job and that's probably the first thing that triggers for me, and then I combine it again, like I said, with maybe something I read in the script that's giving you some sort of subtext, and then again, if the artist does have something they really want to see, then obviously I'm happy to incorporate that. So, but I try to start, like I said, with what I like, because I want to enjoy doing the job and have fun with the project. So that's usually the basis of my decision making.
How much of what you see on your head, Brad? You see the pencils and ink on a page, and in your head you see the colors. How much of that usually goes to stays in the final page, or you change a lot of what you see on your head when working on it on the page, or it used to be really faithful to the original idea you had for the coloring?
Pretty faithful. Like I said before, when I'm starting a sequence, I'll set it up the first page of the sequence, and then I can it's just a matter of going through the technical motions of it. For covers, sometimes I'll get a cover and I'll think about it all night when I'm sleeping, kind of thing, or I'll have it already done. Like if I get a cover from Andy Kubert, I'll think about it for a few days and it's already done in my head. It's just a matter of putting the color down on it. So yeah. Trying different things in backgrounds and that kind of thing. If I'm not sure, and they could always change it. But yeah.
Frankie, how is it for you? From what you see in your head to what goes on the final page. Do you change things a lot, or is really faithful? Go, please.
For me, it's evolving. I mean, I'll have the concept of what I want, and then and I work usually like background to foreground. So I start painting everything in the background, and I'll have, some colors mixing around and stuff. But again, when you start bringing some rendering into figures, then you've got to see how it reacts. So there's this push and pull. So it's that's the biggest part of getting it to work. It's like you have the general idea, and then the other part is too is once you finish it, whether someone else is going to say they hate it or like it. So if you spend a bunch of time on something and you think it's right, then editors go, oh, this guy's this color, it's the wrong environment, or so it's like, okay. I mean, that happened with I did a Moon Knight cover, and they're like, okay, well, that's supposed to be poison coming out of his lip, and it's like no one bothered to tell me. It's like, okay, I thought it was blood, like because it's just coming out of his mouth. So, and then trying other directions, but again, we got there to where it was done. But
yeah, that's the same. I work the same way. I'll start the background, and let's say for a cover, for instance, and they happen to forget to get me the reference of the character. Things say I do all red background, and I'm moving to like a cooler green tinge foreground, and then they come back and say, oh well, that character's all dressed in red. I'm like, well, okay, background's all red. Now I have to redo the whole concept or redo the whole thing. So I mean that happens once in a while, but I always like to make sure I get the right reference first.
Mm-hmm.
So especially if it's a new costume or new something, then I really want to make sure, because I've done that before too many times.
Mm-hmm. Matt, have you ever thought about colors as sounds? And I'm not literal. I'm not meaning literally. Like synesthesia. I'm meaning as feeling, as mood. Is it?
Oh yeah.
How important is for you?
All the time. Yeah. Maybe not all the time, but there's certainly been some projects where that was even in the forefront of my decision making. Like The Wicked and the Divine had a lot to do with music and sounds, and then the same creative team prior to that one, a book we did called Phonogram, same thing. And then there was one issue in particular of The Wicked and the Divine where the god was using their powers, and essentially it was like he got everybody, his power was to put everybody on ecstasy, essentially, to create this crazy rave. And in the script, it talked about the beat of the music at various parts of this party that was being shown throughout the issue. And so I tailored my color choices to match what what Kieran, what the writer was describing as like the beat of the music at that particular part of the party. So yeah, I think of that a lot.
What about you, Brad?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's huge. It really sets the mood. If you quiet hospital scene or nighttime creepy area, well, yeah, it's just like in a movie or in movies type thing. You're really setting the mood. So, and you could do it just by doing a monochromatic page, for instance. So,
yeah. I thought there's been fight scenes I've thought of as like having a beat or a sound to them where it's you're hitting like just the punch panels have a contrasting background, or but then the rest of the panels have a color that's more in line with the rest of the palette, stuff like that. And I think of that musically, even though I'm not a very musical person. I think of that in terms of like beats in a song.
Yeah, but for me, please go, Brad.
Takes care of that with the panel layout, so you can kind of, okay, well, this is what he's going for. Like for that, the dark DK3 at the beginning where the police lights are flashing red and blue. Well, each panel was red, blue, red, blue, red, blue as the lights are kind of changing, and then it comes down to the bloody scene, right? So, yeah, I mean stuff like that. It's just a little trick just to really push the fact. Same as I was saying before about scene location too. You really want to make sure the reader knows exactly where they are or what's happening.
And also, I've always thought about comics storytelling as being much closer to music than it is to movies. When people tell me it's closer to movies, I always say no. I think the storytelling is a lot closer to music because of the pace. So my question now is first for Matt, because you were talking about how important it is for you, and then for all of you is comics storytelling, especially with color. Do you think it's more of a symphony, rock and roll, or jazz?
It just depends on the book.
Yeah, I get it. I think it can
way out, Brad. That's
it can change. It can change for the book. That's like, changing the radio station essentially. It's, going from book to book. But I mean, it depends. Like for example, when I've worked on a book with like maybe the line artist that has looser inks and is more suggestive and less technical or tight, like that feels, I guess, more jazz-like, given the options you listed.
You can pick any other options, by the way.
I'm not a big music person, so we shouldn't. That's why I was always bad on the Wicked and Divine interviews.
If we were talking to, by the way, if we were talking to any British creator here, they go say, no, none of them is punk. They all say punk.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, I a lot of that, it's not always forefront in my mind, but those kinds of comparisons that you're making are definitely there. It sounds like we see a lot of this storytelling in similar ways, because I have often thought that, like, I feel like a jazz musician just like quickly making brushstrokes, as far as like them quickly hitting notes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's why I keep saying, as I was saying before, that I think comics is much closer to music than it is to movies, because of what you just said. It's the brush strokes, it's the pace, it's the you are here and suddenly you have a fight scene. This is the top, and then we go back to the dune and back to the top. That's superhero storytelling, and that for me is a symphony or it's opera.
Well, and there's times where I've listened to certain music when I'm trying to get through a deadline or something. We did that Dark Side War with Fabek and Johns there.
Yeah. And
the deadline was crazy. Like it was over the top, but we tried to get it done anyway. So I would put on like electronic Euro dance music or something just for a few hours, just to plow through it.
Yeah.
And then then I change it. But
pulling out to the real world, like, and not speaking like how it feels like making comics is like making music. There are certain albums I'll put on when I'm like, I just need to get through the rest of these pages tonight. And
it's also really good what you just said, brother. Let me ask you, Frankie, if it's the same for you. That you use the music as a helping tool to get through the pages. It push that certain kind of music that you pick. Pushes you to I need to finish this epic scene or this romantic scene, and you pick the music, maybe even unconsciously, to say, if I use this music, it's going to help me finish these pages.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that a lot. Usually, if it's something I know I'm going to be up for a day and a half doing, the more aggressive, better. It just keeps me kind of, driving towards. That means I can't stop. Just get it at least 120 beats a minute, and just take it, get a cigarette, and no sedatives. So it's like coffee, cigarettes, and just keep plowing through. But yeah, I had to remember there was one day. This is ages ago when I was doing Captain America, and we had to do. I think it was 17 pages in a day and a half. So it's just like, there was just no hope. It's just, just keep drilling. So down to like, I have like an hour and a half to do, each page. And was that my charger or what was that? So yeah, it's just keep plugging, and just don't let up and don't break. So there's aggressive punk, lots of aggressive rock and roll, some death metal, speed metal. So there's a lot of
that.
Sorry to interrupt, but you listen to like books on tape or whatever, like audiobooks. So if I'm working on something and I'm really into this audiobook, I find I might slow down, and then I'm kind of listening. I'm like, oh, and my hand's not moving. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta change it up here.
Yeah, that's why I think it's another risk, right? Because some people tell me that
I do a lot of
Go, Frankie, please.
Pardon?
Go, please go ahead.
I do a lot of like TV series, usually dramas. Like when I'm working, like I'll go through a whole series of something. Like right now, I'm doing The Americans straight to start to finish. So sometimes, I mean, you want something that's either dialogue heavy to kind of keep you interested in the story. But now, last season, it's been heavy Russian talking. I'm not watching the subtitles, so it's just kind of like shit spinning, in the window. If it's an interesting drama, it kind of gets me in
in a limbo stage. So I'm not over concentrating on the work, and I'm not over concentrating on the television. So you kind of find this weird equilibrium. You know, it kind of helps the time pass and the mind just not focus and be more receptive to trying things.
Well, even podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts now too, which is awesome.
Mhm. But by the end of the day, does it happen to you? Like in my case, for example, as I was saying, I'm the fifth of five. So of course, in my parents' house, there was always noise. You know, that if there was silence, is that you could hear my parents saying something wrong is happening.
Yeah.
They knew. So the noise. Anybody who has children here knows what I'm talking about. I have a 6-year-old, and if there's no noise, I get worried. Really. So in this case, when I have no noise around me, I always think, you know, Jack Torrance, that's Jack Nicholson, The Shining, he's coming through my back with a knife. He's probably going to kill me. So I fear the silence. Does it happen to you guys that, as Frankie was saying, in a way, it doesn't matter what sound you have sometimes. You just need to the cacophony because that helps you keep going? Brad?
Yeah, like I always have something, you know, my earbuds in or on my radio. I'll listen to a hockey game, or if there's a baseball game, I'll listen to it, and I just change it up. Like I'll listen to almost tons of different stuff. I recently just bought Cujo. I thought I haven't read Cujo in like, you know, 30 years. So I bought the audiobook and listened to Cujo, and it's a long book, but it's good. So stuff like that. A lot of podcasts. I listen to Joe Rogan all the time, and he's got interesting guys on there, so I enjoy that. And they're long; they're 3 hours. So,
does it happen to you too, guys? To you, Frankie or Matt, that sometimes it doesn't matter what you have in the background, you just need the noise?
I think so.
Matt?
Yeah, 80% of the time I'm probably listening to something. But I don't know the science. I don't know the equation exactly, but there are times when I work really well in silence. I couldn't tell you why or when or what triggers it. I just kind of try to go with the flow. But that I can recall times where I'm working and there's maybe like a movie or a TV show ended and I didn't, you know, there's not a next thing to play and I just didn't bother putting anything on, and I'll look up and go, oh, I've been working for the last 2 hours with nothing on and being productive. But then sometimes, like if, like they're saying, got to have something on to keep you focused, like keep you in the chair, keep you interested.
Yeah, I think it depends on the project too. Some of them are like Matt said earlier, you know, it is work, so you kind of have to find motivation somewhere. But yeah, there's other times where I'm like, oh, I have a whole pile I have to get done. And then I look at the clock and it's already noon. I'm like, oh my God, where did the morning go? And I'm not nearly as far as I wanted to be. And the day just flew by. It's like, oh man, that's frustrating. So.
Frankie?
Yeah, like similar to what Matt was saying, I do find myself in silence occasionally. Usually it's like if I wander back, because my office is like, we have a detached garage, converted apartment. So when I walk back there, it's like I go back there to just do one little thing, or I'm not planning on working, and then something's where I start working on something, and then you know it's gone like 2 hours later. I'm like, shit, I've been back there for 2 hours, and I just didn't put anything on, and so you know, again, there's moments to where I definitely like silence. Usually, my alone time is when I like silence. Just like, you know, if I get a chance to rest, it's like, since we don't have kids, but we've got 5 animals. So we've got, you know, 2 dogs and 3 cats. So there's something always happening somewhere. And so the silent time doesn't happen too often.
Yeah.
Kelly is asking, Kelly Fitzpatrick is asking, do you keep regular work schedules and routines? Brad, you already answered this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to keep in the summer. I'll get up earlier, you know, try to work 6 a.m. till 1 or 2. Wintertime, you know, I would try to work an 8 to 4, kind of like the real person schedule, you know, my kid's school and my wife's work. So, yeah, I just find it's easier. And then there's times where I don't check my email on the weekends unless I have something urgent, but I try to keep it separate. So I try to not work on the weekends, but I've worked the past 4 so it doesn't really work all the time.
What about you, Matt? Do you try to keep regular work schedules and routines or not?
I think it's important. I'm not always good at it. But I think it's important to try. For me, I mean, everybody's different, so who knows? But I think it's probably a useful thing to do. When I first started doing, well, maybe not when I first started, but at a certain point doing this, my wife, she worked out of the house and had a regular job. So I would, at that time, I would try to start work when she left for work and try to be done by the time she got home. And I was, it was a very productive period of my career. So I think that was probably healthy and good for me at that point. I know for a long time I kept track. I would write out everything I wanted to do that week on my calendar. I'm going to do this many pages to this day, all the way through the week. And then that would allow me to keep a tally how many pages I had done. And, for a couple of years, I kept all those numbers. Like I could tell you how many pages I did every week, every month, every year, whatever. And I kind of stopped doing that because I thought, I got this. I can handle my deadlines. I don't need to keep track of all this anymore. And I've just actually recently kind of started coming to the realization that I think besides keeping track of deadlines, like that's an ancillary thing that I don't really need anymore. But I think having it visible and maybe being a little bit more regimented was probably actually the better part of that and good for me because I've been pretty lax the last few years in terms of keeping a schedule. And if I'm being honest with myself, I probably kind of hurt myself because of that. I struggle with motivation here and there over the last few years, more so than, say, earlier in my career. So recently I've been thinking about this whole schedule thing and I kind of circling back to, I think I might need to get a little more regimented. So I think if someone finds themselves struggling with motivation, that a schedule may be something that would help. So I think it can be useful. I think it had been useful to me in the past. And I'm considering maybe getting a little more regimented because I forget, someone was like, I didn't get into, I was listening to a lecture by a writer about creative writing process. And they're like, I didn't become a writer to get up at 9 a.m. or whatever. They're talking about they get up at noon. And I kind of laughed because I'm like, sometimes this isn't a job. It's just goofing off on the computer coloring. But then, on the other hand, I think I might thrive with a little more structure. So I was thinking about kind of implementing that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Frankie?
Yeah,
Frankie, can you hear me?
Pretty regimented. I mean, usually I get up between 5:30 and 6. Yeah, am I volume down?
No, I can hear you.
Yeah.
We can hear you now. You're lagging a bit. Yeah, no. Go.
Yeah, and again, no power. it's just one bed.
Go, please go ahead.
But yeah, I mean, usually I get up in the morning, try to get at least to my first break point around 12:30 to 1 o'clock. See where I'm at, get lunch, check on the animals, all the other stuff, and then head back again about 2 to 3, just to kind of wrap up on things, sometimes 4. And then it depends on, too, with Editorial, if they contact me, if all of a sudden something comes through like a cover, that always happens. Nothing was planned, and I don't get a heads up. And now, I've got to do it somehow. So either squeeze it in or wait till the weekend. Now my Saturday's gone, and but it's moving it down.
Yeah, it's usually around preview time. They're like, we need these covers for previews, and then the next thing you know, I got like 4 covers I got to do on the weekend. It's like, oh man.
Whoops, Brad just fell. Oh, okay, let me.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, if anyone's like listening or whatever, that's maybe curious about getting started or early in their career, something like that, I would say at least try to be regimented at first, because I don't think it would hurt. And you'll figure it out. Maybe you're not a morning person. Regiment doesn't mean getting up at 6, but in the morning. But
yeah, it's individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
I think structure helps.
Better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's some amazing advice from you guys, because by the end of the day, is first learn the ropes, give your structure, do things in a certain regimented way, and then you'll find your own group. You'll find if you're a guy who works amazingly at 6 a.m. or works amazingly at nights, but you find your group being regimented and keeping on a schedule. If you try to find order in chaos without knowing order first, you are not going to. I'm sorry, but no, you're not going to. So Kelly was saying, I've started relating working on art as meditation, especially when in silence. Does it happen to you guys that sometimes when you're working in silence, working is like that? It's like a meditation, like a ritual?
I mean, I don't like working in silence.
Mm-hmm.
Like my meditations when I'm done work and I got to go cut grass for 2 hours, then I kind of just put earplugs in and that's my silence. Being outside, like in the garden or just in the back property or something. And yeah.
That for me, that's walking the dog through the woods. Exactly that. You know, when the AirPods, walking with the dog around the around the green, and that's when you disconnect and meditate, right?
Yeah. At dog walks, I exercise here at home in the garage. So those are like full disconnects. I mean, every once in a while, work will intrude as far as I see the phone light up or something, but that's usually my meditation is oftentimes I'll struggle all day working maybe, and then like go to walk the dog, in the afternoon or evening. And the thing I couldn't color all day, I like kind of fix it in my head on the dog walk. I come home and I'm able to like color it in 30 minutes where I just spent 4 hours failing.
Yeah, because Frankie, the best answers normally come when you disconnect from them, right? When you just feel like, enough. This is not coming out. Let's go around, walk the dog, whatever, drink a beer, watch TV. And the moment you start watching TV, tell me this isn't true, guys, because all of us want to kill ourselves when it happens. You just sit down, okay, I'm going to watch something. You're like this, take the beer. And the moment you do that on light TV is when the idea to solve it, how to solve that shit you've been fighting with for 4 hours. It just comes when you think you're starting to relax and you're like, oh my God, now I have to go to fix it. Right? How often does that happen? Anybody?
Well, I mean, it happens big time, but I don't know, not too often for me.
Almost all the time. I mean, that's why I said, step away and.
Go, Frankie, please.
I think I lost him.
Oops.
But I'll do a lot of figuring, like I said, like when I'm away from the computer. Like I said, if I'm watching TV or watching a game or doing something, then I'm thinking
sorry. My power keeps coming back on and off, and
it's fine. Don't worry about it. You're doing your best, and we appreciate it. Thank you so much, Frankie. So, guys, but just so you know, we are almost at the 2 hour and 30 minutes point here.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's
speak, FrankDArmata, speak. We're here. Even if you hear me saying this like 30 seconds late, just go. Don't stop. Speak.
I think we may have lost him for
yeah, I hear you.
Oh, there he is.
No, I don't think he heard what I said about keep talking. But anyway, if he starts talking, we'll just shut up and let him talk. Okay, guys? No. So I was saying we are at the 2 hours and 30 minutes mark, more or less. So let me ask you one last thing and let you go before you all kill me for taking too much of your life and wasting your time. So the last thing would be, if there's one thing you've always thought about, I want to do this in comics before I retire or die, whatever your choice is, because some of you don't want to retire, and some of you, I'm pretty sure it's like, as soon as I can, I'm going to retire from this shit. What is the thing you would like to do to say, I've been thinking about doing this before I leave comics, and I'm going to do it, whatever happens. You know what? The main thing that you think that you wanted to do in comics that you won't stop until you get it done. You wanted to achieve in comics, I mean.
Go ahead, Matt. I got to think about it.
Yeah, no, that's tough because I think the things that occupy that space in my head right now are kind of all outside of comics. Like, and I don't know if that's because I've achieved everything I've wanted to. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it would be in coloring. Like, I have a couple story ideas I've outlined.
No. I don't mean coloring. I mean in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess.
See how I phrased it? I said in comics.
Yeah. Yeah,
What
sure.
you like to do in comics before you leave the field? Now,
Right.
and you can think about it now too.
No, I've got a couple. I've outlined a few story ideas that I'd never taken seriously. Like, I got to make this into a comic. But we're around stories day in and day out. It's kind of and then we, as I think Brad mentioned earlier, we've been fans of this stuff for our whole lives. So it's kind of hard not to have. Oh, that would make a fun book. So. Anyway, there's some stories, I guess, in comics I wouldn't mind writing, I guess, but I don't know. They're still not high on my list. There's things outside of comics that are kind of occupying that space. But the way you have it framed, yeah, I guess a few stories to write.
Mm-hmm. Brad?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been pretty fortunate. So got to work with some great guys, great people. But I would like to do... I think like some covers on my own, like do fully art to fully painted versions of some covers, stuff like that. Maybe variants or something. I mean, that's something I would like to do. Little more illustration end of it, but yeah, that's about it though. Like, yeah, nothing.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
I mean. Because I never think about like, I really want to draw a comic cover. That's funny. That doesn't cross my mind, but it makes sense to go from coloring to that.
Yeah, I just kind of do it from start to finish. Have one fully painted version, but that's like maybe one day.
Yeah, but that was part of the question, because many times. Hello, Frankie. We see you. That's part of the question, because many times that's what I think. Is, and I asked it to Kelly, to Laura, and to Ruth when they were here last month. Is what's the next step? Because sometimes the next step for a color artist is I want to draw maybe the interiors, or maybe I want to draw a full cover, or maybe I want to write. That's why I'm asking if there is a next step in your head. That doesn't mean you don't like color art anymore, but sometimes you've been doing this for so long, you think, I want to add something else. In your case, Matt, that would be writing, as you said. In your case, Brad could be saying, doing a full cover yourself. What would it be for you, Frankie?
Well, right now I'm just doing a bunch of music stuff. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing music composition, just stuff that I used to do when I was a kid, because before I got into visual arts, I was always doing music. So now I'm kind of reading that and studio and everything else in the back as well.
Okay, so guys, thank you so much for being here. Please don't cut, because I want to say proper thank you when we're off the air. But to all of you, thank you, Brad Anderson, for being here.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, Matt, for being here.
Bye. Thank you.
And thank you, Frankie, for being here. And a special thanks to you because of all the shit you have to go through in this program because of the snow and all that.
Yeah,
guys, as you know, it's 6 feet of snow, a lot of problems with the connection, electricity going off, and Frankie has been fighting to be with us during these 2 hours. So thank you so much, Frankie. And to all of you, thank you.
It's nice
Have a nice day. You too. Yep. Have a nice day. Wear your mask. Don't be assholes. Take care of people. And see you all back on Wednesday with los artistas españoles Fran Galán y Elisa. Hala. Take care, everybody. And we're off in like 3, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.